Good morning. I call to order this regular scheduled meeting of the Lake Havasu City Planning and Zoning Commission for July 17th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Hannigan, please call the roll.
Commissioner Susanna Ballard.
Present.
Commissioner Joan DeZuro.
Here.
Commissioner Paul Lair.
Here.
Commissioner Tiffany Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner J.P. Thornton. Here. Commissioner Lonnie Stevenson. Here. Commissioner Jim Harris.
Here.
Vice Chair Gabrielle Medley. Commissioner David Diaz.
Here.
And Commissioner Mary Costa.
All right, thank you. Seeing that we need an alternate to please come up to the dais, Mr. Stevenson, would you please come up and sign in? Mr. Gilbert, correspondence and announcements, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only correspondence and announcements I have for tonight or today is the action by the City Council on July 9th. The 100 Inlet Drive minor general plan amendment was approved by the City Council, and the Development Code text amendments removing maximum lot coverage in residential zones throughout the city, that was removed as well. So there's a 30-day waiting period before that takes effect, but that's going to benefit a lot of mostly single-family property owners as they try to add accessory buildings and additions to their properties by using setbacks to maintain open space instead of a 50% lot coverage requirement, or in some cases slightly higher. The next item, Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's that time of the year when the chairman and vice chairman are elected for the planning commission in July. So the chair and vice chair are chosen by the commission. And thank you, Chairman Diaz and Vice Chair Medley, for serving as the chair and vice chair over the past year. The selections will be done as two separate items today. The commission will begin by selecting the chair first with the following process. The chair will ask for nominees. Let's see, is that the updated one? The chair will ask for nominees. A member may make a motion to nominate a member for chair. The idea here is to get the nominations first onto the floor. So if there's going to be multiple nominees, those can all be nominated. And the chair will ask for nominees. Board members will provide nominations. Once nominations are complete, a member may make a motion to nominate a member for chair. Only one motion can be active at a time. A second will be required. If the motion is not seconded, the motion fails and another motion can be made. Before voting, the chair will ask the nominee if they're willing to accept the nomination. If accepted, voting will be done through the vote cast system. If the vote fails, another motion may be considered and will follow the same process. And then, of course, the process will be completed for the vice chair following the selection of the chair, following the same process. I will now turn over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. And if we don't get a second within 10 to 15 seconds, we're going to consider that motion failed and we'll go on to the next one. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to elect a new chair for this period.
Chairman, I'd like to
make
a motion to nominate Jim Harris to be the chair for the coming term.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Do we have any other Any other, Commissioner DeZero?
Yes, I would like to make a motion for Paul Lear for chairman.
Do we have a second on Mr. Paulaire? Okay, that motion has failed. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Mr. Harris, would you accept that position?
Yes, I will.
All right, is there any further discussion on the election of Mr. Harris as the chair? All right, seeing none, we're ready to vote. It has me marked as absent. But I'm here.
Do it again.
The motion passes 6-1.
Okay, now do I turn it over now or do I do this is the vice chair?
Now you would do vice chair, sir.
Okay. So we need a motion now to elect a vice chair for this period. Do we have
Chairman,
Commissioner Ballard?
I'd like to make a motion that nominate Tiffany Wilson to be the vice chair for the coming term.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Ballard to elect Tiffany Wilson as the vice chair. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Commissioner Harris. Any further discussion? Okay, we're ready to vote.
The motion passes 7-0.
Beautiful. Well, I want to say I've enjoyed being the chair of this last year, and I thank everyone's cooperation. We have a good board here, and I want to turn over the gavel to Mr. Harris.
Anything else here, Dave?
These are just all the speakers. This is the outline. No, that's it. Yeah, okay. The minutes.
And I too want to thank Mr. Diaz for his service this past year. And thank you, members of the commission. All right, the first item on today's agenda is the approval of the minutes. It's ID 244313, approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections at this time? Or a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz and a second by Ms. Ballard to approve the minutes from last meeting. Any further discussion? All right, let's go ahead and place our votes.
The motion passes 7-0.
Okay. That's a good question. Ms. Hennigan,
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson has just questioned, since both Mr. Diaz and myself have signed in on different monitors, does it still recognize us individually?
Let me see. I think we're going to have you sign out. Let me check with Steve real quick.
All right. Good question.
That is a great question.
Good question. In the meantime, let me start by saying that this is a public hearing and there is a structured order to this proceeding. The city staff will present each item. There will be time for the commission to ask questions of the staff, and then the applicant will have the opportunity to present their case to the commission. That being done, we will then open the proceeding to the public for their questions and input. I would ask that anyone of the public that wishes to speak limit their trips to the podium and microphone to one only. Keep all comments to less than, let's say, 5 minutes, and to stay on point and not discuss subject matter that is not pertinent to the decision being considered here today. After public testimony is taken, I will then close the public hearing and bring the motion back to the table for the city staff's recommendation, discussion amongst the commission, and eventually a motion to approve or disapprove. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. Ms. Hannigan, do we have to sign out?
I'm trying to.
Okay.
Let me take a look here.
We will pause for a few moments, or can we go forward with the meeting?
I think if I have you guys sign out, you'll be able to sign back.
Sign right.
In the corner.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
Technicalities taken care of. All right. The first item on today's agenda, second item actually, is ID 244372. This is a request to approve resolution number 24-08, amending the Parking and Common Master Plan for 1780 McCulloch Boulevard North, Track 2345, Block 1, Lot 3. And Mr. Kearns, your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on McCulloch Boulevard North between Capri Lane and Riviera Boulevard. The subject parcel is Lot 3 near the old Kmart. The subject property and the abutting lots are zoned commercial health district, and are developed as commercial uses. The current master plan approved in 1994 was designed to allow Kmart to expand the garden center on the north side of the building. The parking spaces that were lost due to the expansion were replaced on Lot 3. Prior to the 1994 Parking and Common Amendment approval, Lot 3 had a building pad area, and this Parking and Common Amendment would allow Lot 3 to have a building again. The applicant's letter of intent requests amending the Parking and Common Plan to allow a buildable area on Lot 3 and provide parking for future development. The proposed site plan has 494 parking spaces, 22 spaces less than the currently approved plan. The staff report says the owner has 100% approval from fellow owners involved in the Parking and Common Plan. This was an error. The owner has approval from 3 of 4 property owners within the Parking and Common, which will still meet the minimum of 75% approval for a Parking and Common amendment. Staff received no objections to the request from any review agencies. Staff's conditions: 1, the development shall substantially match the site plan, new Parking and Common master plan submitted with this application. 2, design review to ensure compliance with all applicable city codes, including driveway locations and parking, is required prior to development of the property. 3, any deed restrictions that need to be amended are required to be recorded with Mojave County. 4, the required 10-foot landscape area along McCulloch Boulevard North will be located between the future building and the 6-foot sidewalk easement. This concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kearns. Are there any questions from the commission of staff? No questions at all? Is the applicant present? Would you like to come forward and make a presentation? Please state your name for the record.
My name is Ivan Betancourt. I work at Selberg Associates architecture firm here in town. First of all, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for hearing our case here. Just wanted to add to the presentation that we did do a parking calculation to confirm that with the retail uses there, that this new office use would not be of any negative impact to the current parking and common plan. But yeah, we're here if any other questions aside from that.
Any questions of the applicant by the commission? Anybody? All right.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on this item, either pro or con? Anybody at all? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to the table for staff's recommendations.
Based on the findings, the Development Review Committee recommends approval of Land Use Action 244372 with the following conditions. The development shall substantially match the site plan, new parking common master plan submitted with this application. 2, design review to ensure compliance with all applicable city codes, including driveway locations and parking, is required prior to development of the property. 3, any deed restrictions that need to be amended are required to be recorded with Mojave County. 4, the required 10-foot landscape area along McCulloch Boulevard North will be located between the future building and the 6-foot sidewalk easement.
And that completes it? Okay. We are now at the table for discussion and or a motion regarding this item. Commissioners?
Commissioner Harris.
Mr. Diaz.
I move to approve ID number 244372, request to approve resolution number 24-08, amending the Parking and Common Master Plan for 1780 McCulloch Boulevard North, Tract 2345, Block 1, Lot 3, and with all of staff's conditions.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
And we have a second by Ms. Wilson. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, let's go ahead and call for the question.
The motion passes 7-0.
Congratulations and good luck. All right, the next item on today's agenda is ID number 24-4378. This is a request for a major general plan amendment revising the future land use map designations for 1850 Bahama Avenue, Tract 115, Block 4, Lots 11 through 13, and 21 through 23, and Block 5, Lots 1 through 9, 14.08 acres from high-density residential to resort-related mainland. Mr. Gilbert, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the second of 3 public hearing dates on this major general plan amendment application. The first public hearing was held on June 19th, 2024, at which a lot of comment was taken at that meeting from the public and also for a presentation from the applicant. That was before the Planning Commission, the former City Council meeting chambers at the Police Department building. Immediately following this hearing, today will be a hearing regarding the zoning change and general development plan. The third set of public hearings will be before the City Council on August 13th, 2024 in the City Council meeting chambers at the Municipal Court building. That is where we're at right now. That will also include consideration of a zoning change and general development plan. So essentially this is the second set of hearings on this particular proposed project application. The subject property is a group of smaller lots that have been combined into one parcel located at 1850 Bahama Avenue and comprises a total of 14.1 acres. And you can see on the overhead kind of a general location of the subject property. The subject property is shown as high-density residential land use category from the general plan's future land use map. That permits up to 20 dwelling units per acre and is compatible with a large part of the surrounding area. The applicant is requesting resort-related mainland use to accommodate a mixed commercial and residential resort-style development. To the north across Bahama Avenue is a commercial mixed-use land use with light industrial development upon it, such as storage units and a large manufacturing assembly warehouse use. To the east and west are high-density residential land uses with apartments, condominiums to the west, and mostly vacant land to the east. To the south is high-density residential land use, but is primarily developed with single-family residential uses. And I'll use my arrow here to show you what I mean. And that is this area right here, directly adjacent to the subject property. In the land use plan, it's shown as high-density residential, but as we'll see in the next slide, the existing zoning is different. What is it? Oh. The subject property is shown as residential multifamily. To the north across Bahama Avenue is light industrial. To the east and west are residential multifamily. To the south is single-family residential, and that's all the light yellow here. It directly butts the south. The orange to the north is the light industrial zoning. And then finally, this diagram and the applicant, okay, a couple of things here. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the packet online, which is posted for every planning commission meeting. The packet for the meetings submitted by the applicants, 19 pages of drawings. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at that. This is probably the best encapsulation of the layout of the project among those 19 drawings to put up on the overhead here. The applicant, I'm sure, will have more stuff to show from their presentation. But the applicant intends to construct a 3-phase resort-style development incorporating a surf pool, cliff diving feature, commercial activities, including restaurants, and a combination of condominiums and apartment units. Although the details on the breakdown between the types of uses will be worked out later in the engineering phase. The full development plan and traffic study are included in the information provided online at the city's website with the Planning Commission pack for today's hearing. Mr. Chairman, that's really all I have on the general plan amendment request from the applicants. They are present in the audience. And I also want to point out that when we get to the public comment section on this, I have a couple of letters from nearby residents that asked for their letters to be spoken, read into the record. And we'll do that at the end of the people present for the hearing tonight when they get done.
Okay. All right, then. Are there any questions of staff by commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lair.
Mr. Gilbert, could you explain what the total inventory of multifamily available properties is compared to the 14 acres here that we're looking at?
Yes, the project would consume about slightly under 9% from the best estimate that we have from our GIS specialist at City Hall that was requested to run those numbers. It's just under 9% of our available multifamily citywide, comprising 14 total acres, of course, for the project. So it is a big chunk of our remaining multifamily zoning, and what we included in that was all 4 districts that encourage multifamily development. And that would be, besides the RM district, that includes the RSGD Southgate zone, that includes the commercial health district's residential component, and that includes the RUMS zone as well in the downtown area. So the combination of all those, approximately close to 9% would be consumed by this project.
All right, any other questions of staff by commissioners? Hearing none, is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
My name is Austin Springer with Studio KDA, here representing the applicant. Thanks, Chris, for that presentation. We covered a lot of this last time, so I know you guys are familiar with the project now. Just to restate, 221 units total, though the first phase, which is, we're planning on, as Chris mentioned, chunking this into 3 different phases. First phase is just the first building, which is 46 units. It's the biggest building on site. And the restaurant components, 2 restaurants, and the primary amenity. The scope for this specific hearing is just the high-density residential to resort-related mainland change for the general plan designation. And we wanted to emphasize that the only reason that we're going for this change is specifically to make sure that this facility can be open to the public and not just have the amenities serve residents on site. This will allow us to have a public-facing amenity as opposed to just for the residential residents. We want to make sure that we're doing that. That way, this project is a benefit to the community and not just for out-of-towners. We see this being adding to the draw of the community and adding to places that people who live here in Havasu full-time can enjoy. It'll be a state-of-the-art amenity with a surf pool and a really nice lagoon for swimming. As we all know, it is quite hot here, and we hope it'll be a good place to go during the summer and really year-round. The restaurant as well, we want to make this be a amenity to the whole community, so we're planning some nice restaurants, 5,000 square foot-ish restaurants, as well as a deli sort of marketplace. The idea is for that is sort of a grab and go. If you're heading down to the lake, you can stop by and grab a sandwich before you head down there. This is our third public meeting, second hearing with the Zoning Commission. We also had a neighborhood meeting where we had about 30 people show up back in January. And as part of the major general plan amendment, we've been making sure to listen to the comments that we've received from the public and try to do our best to address those by providing more information and, in a couple of circumstances, making some substantive changes to our plans. The overwhelmingly largest bit of concern from the public seems to have been about the traffic and the extra population that this resort will bring to the area and to the city as a whole. To address that from the get-go, we commissioned a traffic study by a licensed traffic engineer, did everything per the city's standards. We worked with the city traffic engineer to scope that study, asked essentially which intersections should we be studying, what standards do we use. And that initial study found that no improvements were required. They analyzed the different intersections and provide a level of service associated with those intersections in the current condition. We had them also analyze the phase 1 build out condition. And then finally, we had them analyze a condition in the year 2030, which assumes both growth of the city and a full build out of the resort. One of the comments we received a month ago at this last hearing was that there was some concerns that our traffic study was underestimating how much traffic there is in the city because our traffic counts were taken last year in September, when there is less traffic in the city compared to during the winter when you have the large snowbird population coming into the city. Traffic swells with the population. Based off of that, we went back to our traffic engineer in this last month and had them redo the study and write a new memo, which we provided to the Planning Council. We had them assume a 15% greater density, essentially take all of the traffic flows and multiply it by 1.15 for everything, and then redo the analysis of the level of service for all those studied intersections.
This is Cole. Yep.
Okay. The first two scenarios, the base project, as well as the build out of just phase 1, found the same results as before, where there were no upgrades required at any of the intersections. The one thing that did change was the 2030 scenario. The updated traffic study found that by 2030, even without our development, that the intersection at Lake Havasu and Bahama Avenue would fall below an acceptable level of service. And again, that's regardless of we had them model both the no build and the full build out scenario. So yes, that one intersection is, it plays truth to what the residents have been saying, that intersection will be problematic in the long term. That being said, we're sure that this is already on the city traffic engineer's radar as an intersection that will eventually need some upgrading. And our traffic engineer made some suggestions in the updated report regarding that. That's based off of it's a 2% per year traffic growth, which I guess is the standard. We've made that traffic study available again to the Planning Commission, and I'm sure that'll get published out to the general public soon. This is hot off the presses. We only got it a couple days ago, so wasn't able to go out in the original. Another Another thing people have asked about is the water usage on our site, and I'll reiterate what I said last time, is that while, yes, there's a lot of water in the pools that you see in these amenities on site, it's significantly less compared to what the sort of average is for the whole city. Many single-family homes in Lake Havasu reasonably have pools, whereas we have 221 units with just 3 pools, depending on how you classify which pool is separate from the other. And overall is significantly less gallons per unit than is standard in the city. Also, to address just sort of overall water supply, we've had conversations with the city planners about the municipal water supply, and I've been told that the water supply can accommodate up to 100,000 residents, which is way more than there are here now or will be anytime in the near future. And so there's plenty of water to feed these pools as well as everybody else's. We have also made sure to specify drought-tolerant plants on our landscaping plans. There's lots of desert willows, desert ironwoods, chase trees. They're all plantings that require a little bit of water to establish at the beginning, but once they're established, are very low water usage plants. And also, our stormwater will be a certain percentage of the stormwater that falls on the site will be retained underground in called storm tech retention basins that go underneath the parking lots that allows for all of the water that falls on the paved areas of the sites not to immediately flow into the drainage canyon behind it. Noise was also a concern from people. I'll mention that we think that this is a much better alternative to where our anticipated clientele are currently. The people who we expect to use this property are currently renting Airbnbs that are nestled all throughout single-family residential districts throughout Lake Havasu City. You get a lot of poorly managed Airbnbs with people coming in and throwing a party, whereas, and it's right next door, 5 feet away from somebody's home. Whereas here we have a 100-foot buffer from any of the single-family lots to our buildings, and it'll be professionally managed with staff on site 24/7. There's always somebody who can take a complaint if there are any noise issues, and we see that as taking that sort of rowdy behavior out of the single-family neighborhoods and into a place where it belongs, next to an industrial site and with proper landscaping and buffer zones. Fire safety was another concern. These buildings are actually quite fire safe. We've heard that there's concerns about capacity of the fire department. I was happy to see that the newest fire station is underway. The contract for its design was just released a few weeks ago. So hopefully that should alleviate some of the perceived crunch on the fire station availability. But these buildings that we're constructing at 5 stories, you go into a different construction type, which is actually significantly more fire safe than pretty much anything in the city. There will be fire sprinklers on all of these, and it's a type 3A construction, which is protected wood construction, whereas all the single family homes and apartment buildings up to 4 stories are all unprotected wood construction that are much more susceptible to burns. And then finally, the density. We have, like I said, 220 units on site. However, the site is zoned for up to 20 dwelling units per acre, which equals somewhere in the range of 300 units for our 14-acre site. So yeah, we're doing about only 75% of the density that is allowed on site. And also these, as was mentioned, it's going to be split between apartments and condos, and these are not timeshares. We want to stress that. We know that those have a bad perception, and that is not what we're planning here. Like I said, these will be professionally managed on-site managers. And yeah, I think that's it for this presentation. I'll see you guys in a few for the zoning presentation. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions of the applicant by commissioners? Anybody at all? Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Springer, talk me through the process on why the developer arrived at this location for this development and why they think this is a good fit for this area.
Havasu is a huge vacation spot. People come here. There's a lot of business for tourism, and we see, one of our partners is big in the Airbnb space and likes to track the. There's this. I forget the name of the website, but they track the statistics, and the statistics look good. So that's part of how we picked Lake Havasu to begin with. And as far as the siting of this site, it's the best big site available that has zoning that is, compatible with this sort of use. It was the obvious choice. You can pick it out from looking at Google Maps from way up. It's a big site, and we wanted to make a big move here.
So what other locations did you look at before arriving at this? And these lots were already combined when you purchased or when the developer purchased these lots. Is that correct?
No, they were not. We did the combination. They were previously under a different planned unit development, but that planned development had multiple lots. I'm not sure the total history of. It looks like the lots were made when the previous owner, I don't know, more than the current ownership team started purchased the lot something like 5 or 6 years ago. Whoever had it before, they were the ones who subdivided it into what the lots were before us. They put the cul-de-sacs in. So yeah, when we got the property, it was that 9 or 10 or so lots. And we just finished the process of combining all those lots. That way we could have one development. And then as far as other sites, do you mean other cities or other?
Within Lake Havasu, were you looking at spots on the island? Were you looking at spots closer down, like off of London Bridge Road? What other areas were you looking at as a possible site within Lake Havasu to do this type of development?
I don't know. I couldn't super well speak to that. The ownership team had already purchased the land when I was brought on board, but I can just reiterate that, it's after the fact, looking at it, it seems like an obvious choice to me, looking from the maps.
Okay. My other question is in regards to the traffic study.
Mm-hmm.
You hired an outside vendor to conduct the traffic study?
Correct.
What was the criteria given to them? Because I'm going through the traffic study and I have a bunch of questions in regards to that. So I guess I'm trying to start off with first, who influenced the gathering of the data for this traffic study that was done?
Yeah, so the first step we did was reach out to the city, got in touch with the city's traffic engineer, Michael Wolf, I think, or something like that. He had a good conversation with him. He was the one who scoped it, provided all the data. I put him in touch with our traffic engineer to make sure that they did it the right way. Mr. Wolf was the one who chose the intersections to be studied, the different timeframes that we would study it at after we had a meeting with him, explained the project, what we were trying to do, and asked him to set the guidelines of how should we study this to make sure it follows the regulations or the recommendations of the city traffic engineer.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question for you, basic one. Where'd you get, Mr. Springer, where did they come up with the 15% increase in traffic for the time of year when the snowbirds are in town?
Right. I don't know specifically. The report said that they talked to somebody again in the traffic engineering department, probably Mr. Wolf. I had also anecdotally found a couple of news reports online. The data is hard to come by. It was a estimation, I would guess, and backed up.
But that came from city staff.
I'm guessing that it came from us and then was given the thumbs up by the traffic engineer.
That would make sense. They monitor that pretty regularly.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Diaz.
Question. So I just want to get on the record. You mentioned that your studies showed that in the future, the traffic intersections will definitely need some upgrading because of the amount of.
Just the one.
Just the one. I would, from my stance, any developer that's going to do something like this and it's going to increase the traffic, you guys should be paying for those upgrades, not our taxpayers, the city's taxpayers. Just want to get that on the record. And I think it's a leap for you to stand up there and say that this is going to alleviate pressure from Airbnbs in neighborhoods. That's I don't know where that data comes from. I mean, it's a statement and it makes you look good, but I don't think that's a viable statement to make. This is my own personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other
I have a
question by commissioners? Ms. Ballard.
I have a question in relationship to your comments about this offloading some of the Airbnb people that come to visit Lake Havasu.
Yeah.
In that event, when people come to visit Lake Havasu that take advantage of Airbnbs, they usually bring their boats. They bring vehicles with them.
Yeah.
Where can you show us on the map, have you designated extra parking spaces to house boats and RVs?
Yeah, boats and RVs were a huge consideration. We're providing well above the required amount of parking on site. And if you look at the parking layout, you'll notice that a majority of our parking have either back-to-back parking aisles. So essentially we do, one row of parking and another row of parking, and which allows you to either have two cars or you can pull through with a trailer. So it's 40 feet deep. We also have another area dedicated on the northwest end of the site with really long parking stalls. These are intended for, big boats. And we also have a handful of tandem spots that can serve either people who come to the resort with, say, a family that shows up with 3 cars and you can park a couple of them and not need to use them for the weekend, or somebody who comes with their RV and boat, and you can use those double stalls for that. So it was definitely a consideration, and we provided quite a bit of parking to accommodate that. Oh yeah, also on the far east end of the site, we have a bunch of 45-foot deep diagonal parking stalls. And we also made sure to have our traffic engineer or the civil engineer do an analysis to make sure that if you do come on site with your big boat or RV, that you're not going to get stuck in the parking lot.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, Mr. Stevenson?
Going back to the traffic study, the lead-in and the description of the project talks about a planned multifamily residential units, 10,000 square foot restaurant, 1,900 square feet of retail shops. In earlier meetings, you have talked about the occupancy of these units as being a mixed use of resort and condos. I guess my comment is how these units are going to be occupied is going to have a severe impact on the traffic. If we keep straddling this resort is going to have much more traffic than an owner-occupied condo. So I wonder how good this data is on the traffic report when it just talks about multifamily residential units. In addition, I don't see anywhere in this traffic study overview where it talks about a public pool. That too will increase traffic to and from this development, which again furthers my concern with this traffic study. Item number 3 is this traffic study was conducted on Thursday, September 7th from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Well, September is that in-between month around here. We've passed Labor Day. It's a low traffic period of time. Notwithstanding the 15% that we're saying for the winter visitors, I don't think we even have a good idea on what the traffic is going to be during a high volume weekend. In addition, we did it on a Thursday. And if we're again talking about a resort, from what I'm seeing, the data just doesn't support any type of traffic influx that would warrant a resort on a weekend going to this location.
I had something. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yes, heard that traffic's from a resort is probably more busy on a weekend. That being said, the traffic that is being observed when we did our traffic counts is not from a resort. It's from, the industrial facility that's right next door, which is only going to be occupied during the week, presumably, maybe a little bit of weekend traffic, but essentially nil. and the single family and apartment residences that surround the site. And those are going to have just as high traffic flows during the week, if not higher than during the weekend, from people going to and from work. I think that's why they have the morning and evening traffic times. Thank you.
Mr. Diaz, did you have a comment?
Chair, I just wanted to just run some quick numbers. So we currently have about 61,000 full-time residents here that are not here. Those are the people that live here full-time. And they say that the data shows that during the winter months, when the winter visitors come, it swells up to, I'm going to get on the low end, 85 to 90,000 people. So let's say 88,000 people. That's a 45% increase in population during the winter months. So I don't know, going back to what you were saying, Mr. Harris, the 15% is, I don't know where that came from, but it swells up to about 45% more traffic here in town during the winter months, not 15%. Just wanted to get that on the record.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant by commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Springer.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. All right, this is a public hearing. And again, there is a structured order to this. I'm going to start with the people who have already signed in for or signed up for speaking. I've got a stack of papers here. So let's start with
Commissioner, Chairman, is that for this hearing or is that for the next hearing?
Good question.
Okay.
There may be some people who want to speak on both items. A lot of them just put a topic, so I would call them.
So should we take them all at one time, or maybe the next one, or what?
I would probably do them for this one and then.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this first hearing is on the appropriateness to amend the city's future land use map in the 2016 general plan. The next hearing will be on the actual planned development rezone of the property for this resort use. So there's two different things going on. So I may have to parse through what they're intending, what they listed on the comments.
Still doesn't answer how I should handle this.
I know.
Mr. Chair, I would just call them up if they'd like to come up and speak about the general plan. You may. If you're confused about the difference between the general plan item, this item, or the next plan, the plan development rezone, it's okay. They're going to hear your comments whether you speak on this item or the next item. Just try not to repeat yourself in both items. And I think that's the best way to proceed.
Right. I'm going to call these folks and ask if they want to speak on the general plan or the rezone. So let's start with Katrin Phillips. Are you here? Do you want to speak on the general plan or the rezone? Yes, you do. Please state your name for the record.
Good morning, Katrin Phillips, PHILLIPS. Good morning. Thank you for having us. Some of you might remember me from last month's meeting. I will not repeat my concerns from that meeting. However, they still stand as far as noise, water, and so on. Adding to that, just based on what Mr. Diaz just said, our winter numbers, just realized we are scratching the 90,000, and Austin reflected on our water situation being more than adequate for 100,000, which we will never reach. So I think that stands to be debatable. Another point Austin made is that the property is chosen to be away from residential area, which it is not. As illustrated earlier, there is single-family residences adjacent to it. It is not 100 feet. It's probably more like 30 feet away. I would like to invite everyone to educate themselves on their sister project in Mesa, Cannon Beach, call Exhibit A. If you look up Google Earth, in this case, O marks the spot. The location in Mesa is entirely in an industrial area, which either shows that they had the good sense to put it there or that they were not welcome in a residential area. I'll submit this for the record. If you do look up the Mesa Cannon Beach, you'll find some interesting newspaper articles too as to water park dead in the water. The second, I'd like to illustrate from their own webpage from Cannon Beach. This is a nighttime illustration of the water park that I think very well illustrates the nighttime light pollution and possible noise pollution as well, because this looks like a party pool. And if we're talking about noise and noise buffers, buildings being noise buffers, the noise doesn't stop at the pool. Noise gets carried into parking lots. And again, we are adjacent to that property. So strong objections from the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Next one I have is Ron Phillips. Okay.
Morning, Ron Phillips, PHI, double LIPS. I'm just going to quickly run through the points that were brought up already as far as our traffic goes on Lake Havasu in Bahama. They call it the suicide corner down there. The residents who live down there regularly tell us about the accidents they have down there. Also, I wanted to point out that I sat through some of your meetings. Your new bridge is going to be coming out on Palo Verde, which is almost adjacent to Bahama down there. So your traffic is going to be significantly higher than otherwise published once that bridge comes in and they start routing everybody coming in and out of town through that second bridge. Another point my wife brought up, and Harris did too, basically light pollution. We talk about a lot of light pollution here in Lake Havasu, and we're going to get a lot of it from there. Pools, they're going to be running things and everything else. One of you already brought up about the parking situation. Everybody comes with a boat, or everybody comes with a side-by-side. At the first meeting we had, he advertised the parking as being 1.5 parking slots per unit. Okay. Not 45-foot deep boat parking or adjacent or anything else. He said 1.5. Water, I think we talked about water already numerous times. I think we got well problems right now. I think we had 3 coming in off the island out there. I think 2 are down right now. And it's going to get continuously worse with more people coming in. And the last thing we had, this is my 4th meeting. This is our 3rd with the city. And we had one, as he said, his neighborhood. And we kind of jumped on the presenter there a little bit, all 30 or 40 of us. We had quite a few people there, and nobody was agreeing about what we should be doing here. Everybody was against it. And then at that last time he identified himself as the owner and the builder. And he came forward and said, I don't really care what you want. I own the property and I'm going to build what I want. Okay. So I'm just here to let you know, I don't think that's right. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Mr. Phillips. And let's please hold the applause. Thank you. Next one is Cindy Ritter. Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. My name is Cindy Ritter, R-I-T-T-E-R. My concerns are the light pollution, the water, the traffic, especially with the new bridge going to dump right down in. The proposal is to dump right down in that area. I don't believe that this type of property should be in the area where they're wanting to put it. It should be down closer to the lake, if anywhere here. I also am concerned about where are they going to get the people to staff this place and work at this place. They're going to take people away from our businesses that have been here for 25, 30 years and the businesses that are currently struggling, trying to find people to work there to stay open. Our family-owned businesses. Now the water. Yeah, we have the water, but should we use the water? I know our allocations are way lower than what we are really allocated for, but should we bring in a place like this that's going to use water and that we may need for the future? Also, where's our affordable housing? We don't have enough affordable housing here to house the people who live here. As many of you know, I work with the veterans in our community. We don't have enough affordable housing for our veterans to live in, to be able to afford to live in. They're living out in the desert. They're living in their cars. Why do we want to bring in something like this that's going to not be affordable housing and take up area that we could possibly use for affordable housing? I just don't think this is a place where we should have this type of resort in that area, or really in our community, that's going to take away from the people that currently live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have David Tobar. Please state your name for the record.
Tobar, T-O-B-A-R, David. I'm a resident of Lake Havasu City. I live on Riverboat Drive. I've been here since 2004. I've heard the noise many times in different locations on industrial. We have the heavy traffic on industrial. We have, there's a bar near me that once in a while they have a party, and you can hear the noise. I can even hear the noise from Site 4 when they have the big activities that go on there. And I think that's going to be a big problem because I don't know what their schedule for turning off the people from making all the noise and situation. The traffic, I think it's going to be terrible. I think they'll be parking down my street because the traffic is going to be so much. There's no signals at either end. And Mr. Diaz, I think, brought that up before in previous time that we have a problem. Who's going to pay for those signals? It's just nonsense what they're thinking of doing. And the street's just too narrow. You're not going to be able to expand that streets. And the water situation, everybody thinks we have water. We do not have water. We're going to be in problems. And 5-story buildings, that's an unbelievable 5-story building. And what's going to happen when they put the first phase in? Who's going to be watching them when they do the second phase? And staffing, where are you going to get all the people? A lot of stores here do not have enough people to help running their own businesses. I think it's the wrong location for this. I think this is terrible. I hope that you all put your notes in here and make sure we do not pass this. This is not going to be a good place for us. I appreciate it very much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Matthew. I'm having a hard time reading the. Please come to the record and come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Matthew Thibaud, much more simple than it looks. Thiebaud.
It was your writing.
I can't either.
Sorry about that.
I live about a half a football field away from this development on Rainbow Avenue North. I bought my property in 1995. I live here full time. I would not have bought that property if the zoning had been for this high density type of development. I wouldn't live there, and I probably would be at my house not worrying about this, but I do live there. I'm not going to talk about the things people have talked about already because I'm going to talk about something that many of you are going to call me a conspiracy theorist. In real estate, the primary 3 rules are location, location, location. Have you ever seen a resort built next to a tire store and a warehouse? They don't build resorts next to industrial areas. You can't walk to the bars. You can't walk to the lake. You can't walk to a park. You can't walk to a grocery store from this location. And as soon as you leave this beautiful development, you see the ugliness of industrial area. I believe this property is destined to fail. And I believe that the partners backing this development already have a backup plan. For the last 3 years, and this is related, we've had open borders. Our country has had millions of undocumented immigrants moving in, and they need places to stay. We've already seen in major cities all across our country, and small cities too, that the federal government is coming in, paying for the housing of these immigrants, taking over motels, commercial areas, etc. Now, if you are a Democrat, you believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you are a Democrat, Lake Havasu City is a thorn in your side. It is mostly conservative. It is mostly white. And the Democrats will be in control of the presidency. We know that. Open border policies will return. And so I think the backup plan is that when this fails, as I think it will, they will just rent these units to undocumented illegals. I can't say that, sorry. Criminal aliens. See, diversity, equity, inclusion means that Lake Havasu City needs more people of color, needs more people that speak different languages. That's what I think the backup plan is, and that's what scares me to death. Because they've done it to, there's a small city in Iowa that's had this happen. I think it's 50,000 people, and right now they're trying to house 20,000 undocumented immigrants. Do you think this can't happen? These partners that are backing this aren't in the business of losing money. The federal government is paying more to house these people in motels than the motels make in renting these units. Do you think it can't happen in Lake Havasu City? I believe it can. And I believe the Democrats that control Phoenix and Flagstaff and Tucson, wherever, the federal government, they want Lake Havasu City to be more diverse, and they will pay big taxpayer dollars to get more diversity, equity, and inclusion into our city. And although all of the other problems that people talk about concern me, you cannot pull out a Papago onto Lake Havasu Avenue most of the year without sitting there like you're in LA traffic waiting for an opening. This is just going to make it almost impossible to pull out there. So I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time, and yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I've been right 100% of the time over the last 4 years.
Thank you, sir. Kelly Chapman. Do we have a Kelly Chapman?
Hello and good morning, committee. Thank you for having us here today.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Kelly Chapman, CHAPMAN.
Thank you.
I was here at the first meeting, and I brought up concerns about older multifamily apartment buildings that will go on the wayside when they bring in 221 units. That will cause a lot of these apartment owners, which is one of myself, for them to go on the wayside and become abandoned. Concerns. However, the individual representative here today had stated previously that they were going to be either condos or apartments as affordable housing, and today's primarily referring to as taking out the short-term rentals. That tells me that he's doing short-term Airbnbs. Maybe not specifically, but it seems to be that's about the roundabout way of them getting to that point. I also had a conversation with a previous a friend of mine, an agent here in town that represents and manages about 1,000 units of properties here. And I do not have facts, but she had commented about there's some soil contamination up through Bahama that I don't know any facts about, and I'm wondering what that's all about. I think that's a huge concern. My family and I, we were involved in the PG&E chromium poisoning issue in Hinckley, California, and we were all poisoned from that back many years ago. And if there's soil contaminants there that they're discussing that are very similar to what we were dealing with chromium picolinate dumped into the soil, how can they bring in 221 units to house people safely? Again, I have no facts on that, and I don't know, but I'm hoping somebody knows something about this that maybe somebody can look into. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dave Weinhammer. All right, thank you.
You guys are making them work.
Making me work for it.
I wanted to see you try. My name is Dave Weinhammer, WIJNHAMER. First and foremost, the current state of Lake Havasu infrastructure must be carefully considered. The existing roads, which all the roads around this resort is only a 2-lane highway. And as we all know, industrial is the main path to go down to Windsor Boat Docks. So that's where it's going to be making a lot of traffic in the summertime for boats and everything else. And also, too, is in the diagram, I guess there's a 1 and a 2. I did not see any guest parking because they're leaving this open to the public. So where is the public going to park? Because all the spots are supposed to be for the residents of that place. So where does the guests that want to go to the restaurant and the wave pool and the cliff diving and everything else go to park. You can't park it on the street because it's not wide enough. Also, the utilities and service may not be equipped to accommodate the increased demand of a new resort, or would bring the strain of the town's infrastructure, which can lead to congestion, environmental degradation, and a decline in quality of life for the residents surrounding. Furthermore, the efficiency within the fire department and police department cannot be ignored. With the limited staff levels, these essential emergency services are already struggling, meets the needs of the community in the event of an emergency and a proposed resort. The delays in response times could have a dire consequences, putting lives at risk, jeopardizing the safety of both residents and visitors alike. As we know now that anything happens to this town and it's congested and everything else, it's hard to get to places. Doctors too, to go to the emergency doctor right now, you're looking at 2 to 3 to 4 hour wait in the emergency room. Having a cliff diving place at this resort, wave pools, there's going to be injuries. There's going to be so much more at that one place. All of our resources are going to be put to there. What about the rest of the town? However, moreover, the lack of availability of workers in Lake Havasu presents a serious challenge for the successful operation of this resort. Without a sufficient workforce to fill essential roles, the resort may face challenging in delivering quality service and maintaining the standards of expected by guests. The shortage could lead to understaffing, overworked employees, and a diminished guest experience, ultimately tarnishing the reputation of Lake Havasu as a desirable destination. In light of the concerns that propose to waive the quota systems to fulfill the staffing needs in the resort raises additional red flags. Like everybody else said here, we have a lot of businesses here. I have a friend that has a business here, a restaurant that has to close Monday and Tuesday because they can't get enough staff to fulfill a 7-day week opening of their business. So they are really running hard in getting people around staff. Look around, there's hiring posters all over the place, and we can't do anything about it. So basically, that's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Donna Durenberger.
Good morning. My name is Donna Durenberger, Durenberger. And the first thing I want to say is that Mr. Springer said that they were going to take the noise out of the neighborhoods and put it where it belongs. That's a quote from him. But I live on Rainbow Avenue North. I know people who live on Biscayne. Right behind me, there's Riverboat. We qualify as neighborhoods, right? So he's not taking it out of our neighborhood. He's putting it smack dab in the middle of it. Now, I live on a hill on Rainbow. It gives me a beautiful view of the lake. But it also, when they have a concert at Windsor Beach, I can sit in my house with my TV on and hear the music. So is that going to be the same thing here? They're going to have music at the pools with loud bass, and that's going to be my backyard from now on. Also, there's going to be people screaming and drunks, and, there's going to be rowdiness from time to time. I'm concerned about the noise most of all for myself. There's going to be light pollution. That's my concern. And are they going to fill in, like behind me is a riverboat, and then like on Bahama, where it's proposed, there is between Rainbow Avenue North, there's a big low spot there. Is that all going to be filled in? So like on Rainbow Avenue, that'll be right in their backyard, or are they just going to build on is it going to be filled in there? That's one of my concerns. You don't know?
Don't know.
So, if they did that and then they built, like some of the people on Rainbow Avenue North, that'll be right in their backyard. So how are they going to keep the noise out of there? As far as enforcing it, they're going to have somebody there to enforce it all the time. Like the one gentleman said, he says he's going to do what he wants to, and he doesn't care. Doesn't sound to me like he's planning on enforcing anything. So that's my major concern. And, of course, the traffic, the lights, the water. I'm concerned about the water. And what's that going to do to my property value to have that behind me? So, you know, I have a couple houses in Havasu, and the one that we live on just happens to be on Rainbow Avenue North. I love my neighborhood. We have a great neighborhood. What's that going to do to our property values? That's my main concern. That's basically all I have. Everybody else addressed my concerns, so thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Crystal DeFries. Is Crystal here? You gonna pass? Okay. And lastly, we have Agnes Gadsky. Please state your name for the record.
Agnes Gradsky. I live on Rainbow also, and Donna is one of my neighbors, and there's other here that are neighbors. The problem is, when this building comes up, my view's gone from the lake. And when I purchased my property, that was a turn on. I have a neighbor that asked that I speak for him also. His view is going to be gone. The privacy that I have when I get in my pool, I'm going to have somebody looking down from their window in my backyard or their yard or Kathy and Jim's yard. It's not fair. I don't believe that we should have to accommodate them when we've been there. I've been there since 1999. And I love the neighborhood is wonderful. I love my view. I love everything. But everything is going to go away. Everything. That's not good. Traffic, drinking, drunks, music, loud. No. If I have a party, the neighbors have the right to say, hey, Aggie, put it down. And I do, because I have lots of celebrations in my family. But to listen to music 24/7 or people screaming, it's not going to be fun for any of us. I appreciate you listening. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're still at the public hearing. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Please state your name for the record.
Martin Stansbury. I own a property at 1810 Bimini Lane, which is directly adjacent to one of the driveways for this property. Probably have more of the issues than anybody else that I've heard speak so far. Probably be surprising that I'm neutral on this issue. Most of the issues that have been brought forward to you today are legitimate, but my understanding, based on the way the property is zoned right now, somebody could build 300 apartments there tomorrow and have the same pool, the same lights, the same parking. My biggest concern is the intersection at Lake Havasu Avenue and Bahama. It is a disaster since the concrete divider has been put on Lake Havasu Avenue, and I'd like to see that addressed. But that's an issue whether it's apartments or a resort. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm neutral on the project. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name's Emiliano Torres. I'm a terrible boat trailer driver. There is no way I can get my car and trailer into that parking lot. Yes, there's some spots that will fit, but on a Friday night, there's no guarantee that those spots are going to be available or taken up by a subcompact. I can't turn that corner tight enough to most of those spots to get my car and boat trailer in. So what happens now? Well, I guess I can park on Bahama, or I know we could maybe build some more storage facilities so I can place my boat in storage. The other thing is that the traffic study consider that so much of the traffic is going to be trailer traffic. You're going to have people with cars and trailers trying to make left-hand turns into residential and locally traveled streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Hi, Ashley Cronin, Cronin. I originally came here because I thought this was a city council meeting and I was going to ask them if they were aware of any migrants that were being housed in Havasu. So this is kind of speaking to the conspiracy theorist Matthew in the back. He's not wrong. I speak Spanish like I speak English, and I overheard somebody at Smith saying that they're being housed at Motel 6 or Motel 9, I don't know what number. So that could very well happen, or maybe already happening here with what he said. the corporations that are building here, like the one that is building out at the island and this one, their political contributions are all ACT Blue. So that'll tell you what direction we're heading. That's all.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
Taylor Harrison. First of all, thank you for your consideration on this topic. I wanted to address just a couple things. First of all, Martin said it first, where right now it's currently zoned to be able to do a project like this. I understand all the neighbors and everything not wanting a 5-story building in their backyard. So if I lived in that neighborhood, I would feel the same exact way, and I think most of us in this room would. That being said, there are a couple considerations that I wanted to bring up, because really the decision on this project sets the precedence for the future in a lot of ways for our city. We live in a desirable community. People want to be here. Resorts want to be here. And the pandemic really showed that too. So I want to bring a couple things to light just so we can make a really good decision here. Mr. Diaz, you mentioned that we have a 45% population increase during the snowbird season. That doesn't exactly equate to a 45% traffic increase, though. Although I do think their 15% number is low, I think most snowbirds travel together, right? So probably not a 45% traffic increase, but I do get caught at the stop signs and everything too. So I understand it is quite a concern. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, staffing has been brought up a number of times here, and this is the first time I've been in a room where people are saying that new jobs is a bad thing. I honestly think more jobs for our community is a good thing. So there are some pros to this complex. I would be very, very excited to see the condos. They weren't discussed much in this plan here, but if this does help tackle some of that affordable housing, that's something that Havasu desperately needs. So I understand that this was largely focused on resort, but I am intrigued to see more affordable housing in this community. And that's why I wanted to speak to you folks on this matter, because I understand most of the opinions in this room are negative concerning this. And I could see both sides. I'm neutral. I live on the south side of town. It really doesn't affect me except for when I'm driving up industrial. And then one other question that was raised, what considerations did they have for this specific property? Now, obviously, I'm not the person that made that decision, but I do think, just for the thought process of all of you commissioners, is perhaps it had something to do with the fact that one of the main boat ramps is right down industrial, so they're literally a street away from that. That traffic would increase there. And also for the community, there's really not a lot of available space for a project like this. When it was mentioned to be closer to the water, that's all state trust land until it gets sold. So anyway, thank you for your consideration. I just wanted to bring those points up.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Please state your name for the record.
Bonnie Toy.
Say again, please.
Bonnie.
Get closer to the mic.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bonnie Toy. First, really odd question. I thought David Diaz was the commissioner, but he's over there and you're running the meeting. So I didn't understand that. Apparently I missed that.
It was Election of Officers Day.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Second, I would just like to encourage everybody while I can to, if you, as someone who has been told that you are the only person who speaks up on a subject, that because of me being the only person speaking up on a subject, I was told that nobody else cares about that subject. So I believe that anyone and everyone should speak up on every topic that they feel they need to address and ask questions for. I just want to say that. I know it doesn't have to do with this meeting particularly today, but I just want to make sure that people know that during the next item that comes up, if they feel the need, to speak about it, they should be allowed to speak about it, even if it's repeating something, because when you feel like you're the only, it's not very fun very often. Second, or third, I do have a question is, I would like to know what the difference is between high density residential and what is the request to turn it into? Resort residential? So what is the difference between high density residential and resort? Mainland residential.
Is that a question to the commission?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason that the applicant put forth the request to go to resort-related mainland is so that they could have the wave pool, surf pool, and the cliff diving open to the public. The land use that's in place would be sufficient for an apartment complex, for example, that had its own wave pool, but it would not be something that would be able to be open to the public or have a commercial component like the restaurants. So they're asking to change the land use plan to accommodate basically a resort-style development instead of an apartment development.
Is there a definition specifically for high-density residential and resort mainland?
Yes, it's all in the general plan. It describes what resort mainland is. High-density residential is considered 10 to 20 dwelling units per acre, which would be on a 14-acre property, 280 dwelling units.
Okay, and then resort residential mainland is
mixed use. Residential with commercial component, restaurants, everything like they're proposing. You have open to the public, you have non-residential components to it.
Are the views considered resort residential?
No, I would say they're not. Yes, they have facilities inside like a restaurant to serve the residents of the views. The views is primarily a 4-story residential structure.
Mixed use. I think that's a mixed use zoning over there, isn't it?
It's a different zoning classification as well to where we're talking here. It's not the same zoning.
Okay, it seems like a similar plan, and I know that the Views does open their restaurant up for people to go in and who are not residents to go in there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? We have a lady coming forward from the back. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Kathy Quist. We own a home adjacent to this property. Not only do I believe that it's a mistake because of traffic, we've got 5-story buildings that are going to have lights on 24/7, which is going to affect all of us and our views and the nightlife and everything. As far as the boats and everything go, we all know what the traffic's like on weekends down by Campbell Cove, just trying to get their boats down into the lake. If we've got this up on industrial and area, again, it's going to be a nightmare. So, and for us that own houses and that, like I said, 5-story buildings can look into our properties and everything else, taking away our vision for what we had planned when we moved here. I don't think this is the place. I also own in a resort area too that has night bed and breakfast, but that's what it's going to turn into if this keeps up. And yes, it is a problem. Even when we go down to weekends to our own place, I know what it's like in a resort area where you've got that many complexes. So that's all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Please come forward. Oh, we got somebody coming from the back.
Go.
We'll get you next.
My name is Jim Quist, Quist.
and I'm a homeowner. That was my wife. That was just a few minutes ago. What I want to kind of talk about is I agree with literally everything everybody has said here, and you've all heard it on infinitum, no doubt about it. But the one thing that really bothers me more than anything else is we as a community decided that the tiny house thing was going to be the savior to be able to get low rent income into people. So we went and we built all these little tiny homes, and still a whole lot, where these people could afford to go and get a job at a grocery store or a whatever. Long and short of it is, Californians came in, bought them up, and turned around and raised the rent where they can't afford to be in there. So what makes anybody here believe that this property, that if it goes forward, is going to turn out exactly the way that the developer has said? I don't. Anyway, that's enough out of me.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Gary Davis, DABIS. I live right up behind Katrin. I got to tell you, I don't know if any, coming out there in the summertime or even in the wintertime, getting down on Lake Havasu Avenue is a real pain right there at Poppygo. And don't think for a second that this overflow isn't going to come over to there. You know, there's so much land here. You guys know all the land. Give them a chunk and let them put it out there. Give them a chunk. You want the revenue. Give them a chunk of land with all the parking they can handle. They don't need to come in our neighborhood. It's not even reasonable. And it's like they don't care. So we're counting on you guys to care. Okay? I didn't move here to retire here to listen to shit. It's the same thing I left California for. That's it from me.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Jim Mitchell, MITCHELL. And I live at 1788 Bahama Avenue. So I guess I'm a neighbor. And I'd like to lower the temperature a little bit. First place, I categorically am not a NIMBY. You can't hear me? Sorry. Okay, I'll step closer. Anyway, my concern is the traffic and the traffic study. It has some value, I think, as recyclable newspaper, but not much else. I would really invite all of the members of the group to come out there and drive Bahama Avenue, trying to go out onto Lake Havasu Avenue. Now, where we live, we can see the intersection. Excuse me. And what we notice now is a great many people don't use the intersection anymore. They go through the new car wash. It's very smart. It's a straight shot. I don't think I'd be happy if I was a car wash owner, but I see the mail people, I see UPS, FedEx, and a lot of other people cutting through the car lot so they don't have to sit there in that corner, because in order for you to get out onto Lake Havasu Avenue, you have to encroach almost into the number one lane. You're well past the line of demarcation for that intersection. And it's compounded by the fact that a number of people who work at the other car wash park on Bahama Avenue. So you're sight blind to begin with. You got no room to maneuver. And I hadn't planned on speaking today, so I'll stop right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak on this item? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close. Please come to the microphone. State your name for the record.
Donna Durenberger.
The guy that had the mojaveMist.com shirt on said that we need more affordable housing in Havasu. Are the proposers planning on selling their condos affordably for affordable housing? That's my question. And the other question is, like on Rainbow Avenue where I live, we already have a lot of people that cut through coming from like Lake Havasu Avenue or from Acoma to cut through to go to Lake Havasu Avenue. And we have people going 50 miles an hour on a 25-mile-hour residential street. Is that going to increase? Did they do anything on that particular traffic research that they did? And also, you guys are talking a lot about when the snowbirds are here, and September is probably our slowest time of year because you're in between the snowbirds and in between the people, coming from California for boating. To me, the worst time of year for traffic is in the summer when you have people pulling 40-foot boats with huge tractors and stuff like that. But I was just wondering about the traffic on Rainbow Avenue cutting through from Acoma and Lake Havasu Avenue, if they did any kind of research on that too. But I would like to know if they are planning on selling those affordably for affordable housing like the guy suggested. So we do need affordable housing in Havasu, but I don't think that's going to be one of them. And that's it. Thank you.
Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Do you have something new to add?
Yeah, Dave Weinhammer. I'm for more businesses. And what the gentleman talked about is, this is going to bring more business, opportunity to get a job. Yet again, it's probably going to take away from all the businesses we do have here that are mom and pop shops and everything else. Here's my question too. We have a big mall out here. Look how many open buildings are empty now because there's nobody over there to go and fill them. That was a business opportunity to get people to get to work. It's empty. I mean, there's a lot of places out there that don't have any kind of a business or anything in those empty businesses. So I don't see this being a positive.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that has anything to add? Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion and ask the applicant come back and address some of these. Is that what you were asking? There's somebody online? Oh.
You have the letters to
read. We'll read those into the record. Has there been somebody online that called in? We're not aware of it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that unless, I don't know if we sent any. Oh, it's one of for you guys? Okay. So they're with the applicant. Does he want to?
Yeah, can you hear me?
All right, so this is the applicant?
Yes, he's with the applicant team, correct? Okay.
All right, does the applicant have any comments about any rebuttal to what has been said?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Cole Cannon. Can you hear me? Is it a good time for me to speak?
Go ahead.
Right. I'll let Austin get up and talk about some of the technical aspects, and I regret that I couldn't be there today, folks. I'll be there at the next meeting. I am the prime developer of this project, as I am Cannon Beach here in Mesa, Arizona. I'll first say there has been a lot of sort of odd attacks on my character regarding political donations and things that I just want to give you a little context. I, number one, have no intention to fail on this project. The reason I approached Lake Havasu City on this project before we even acquired the property was because I was told it was open for business. It was very forward thinking, very progressive in the sense that you guys want new opportunities. I will tell you the surf feature we plan to build here will be number 6 in the world. So it really puts Lake Havasu on the map of offering something unique. I think you have a very unique atmosphere of adventure and activities, outdoor activities, boating and cigarette boats and UTVs, et cetera. And this just adds to that same sort of energy that you guys have as a city. I myself have 6 children under the age of 13. I'm a family man. When I've stayed at Lake Havasu, the last few times I've had to rent 2 hotel rooms. We don't fit in one hotel room. So our choices are we get multiple hotel rooms or we rent an Airbnb. So when we talk about taking the life out of the neighborhoods, meaning removing some of the demand for Airbnbs, the thesis is simply We're trying to create a property that families, big families such as mine, extended families, et cetera, can not only rent a single room, but they can rent a 3-bedroom suite. We have as high as 6 bedrooms designed for 1 unit at our property. And all of a sudden, as a renter, which is kind of how this started, I think, what would my family like, in hopes that other vacationers would like the same thing. We've designed this more comfortable living situation where I don't have to be wedged in the middle of the neighborhood. I don't need to be disruptive to the other neighbors. And that's sort of the impetus for the project that we're building. But again, no intention to fail here. But at the same time, I don't want to be a square peg. If the city of Lake Havasu City is not open for business, if you don't want to allow this project to go forward, then maybe we are better off doing low-income affordable housing. And as it's been properly noted, I think by you, Mr. Chairman, we're allowed to have, under the current zoning, 280 units. So just to be crystal clear, we're not asking for even the maximizing of the density units. We're actually lowering what we're allowed to do. And as the gentleman said earlier, we're allowed to do pools, we're allowed to have lights, and we're allowed to have cars parking there. And if the community believes that low-income affordable housing is a better fit for this, frankly, it'd be easier, safer, and a less risky investment for us as a developer group. And so I don't want to force it. If that's what the community wants or this commission wants, then we would respect that decision. I would just rather know now and not spend a bunch of additional money and effort on this. We just thought we could bring a nice thing to the community. It's not anything that's not currently permitted by the zone in terms of people being there. And, to address the juxtaposition to industrial, we actually viewed that as potentially a good thing, that it might minimize the impact on other neighborhoods. And I appreciate all the concerns that have been voiced today. We're doing our very best to address them. But ultimately, if we don't do this and we sell the project to somebody else, then you might very well have apartment coming in here. And I think that's the alternative that people really need to think about, including the esteemed member of the commission. So again, I'm cheering for this for as a family man, as a tourist myself. I think we can create a great, unique asset for you folks. But let me know. I mean, if you guys aren't open for business, I want to know that now, and we'll take our resources elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That was not called for. Mr. Springer, rebuttal.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in debate club. Just wanted to address a couple of the points brought up by the commenters, specifically about lights. The City of Lake Havasu has an exterior lighting ordinance that we plan on fully complying with. It limits the directionality of the lights. Everything must be shielded, casting light only downwards. It's only allowed to have 2% of the light projected to go above a 90%, 90-degree plane. There's also limits on what's called light trespass that will limit how close we can have our lights to the edge of the property to make sure that our lights aren't casting glare on other people's properties. We'll be fully complying with those once we get into the engineering part of this project. In terms of noise, we'll say that we specifically made choices about having the central amenity, which admittedly will be the loudest part of the site, to surround that with buildings. Our intention there is to shield that sort of active part of the site from the neighboring community. And we've also provided significant landscape buffers. There are some concerns about filling in land around the site. That's a hard no. That's a drainage channel that's the key for not just our site but other sites upstream from us to have stormwater runoff. We're not planning any changes to that. You can see on the site plan we've stayed well away from that southern border of the site. That's not planned to be filled in at all. We're essentially just sort of leveling out the area, the pads that are adjacent to Bahama. Traffic, again, we totally hear you on the traffic, but it's important to note that, first of all, the current motion is about whether or not this can be open to the public, and as opposed to the density of the site. But also the density of the site that we are proposing is significantly less than what is allowed for on site. In this alternate scenario that Cole suggested, a different developer could be coming in here with significantly more units and generate more traffic. Wanted to provide some clarification on the parking. We don't have just 1.5 ratio. That's the minimum required ratio for the city. We have well in excess of that. We have something closer to 3 parking spots for each units, but it sort of depends on how it's utilized based off of all of the pull-through sites. You know, the pull-through sites can either count as pull-through spaces can either be 2 normal car parking spaces or 1 RV/boat space. So there's a bunch of different sort of balancing between those, but one iteration of those numbers is about 2.5 car parking spaces for each unit and an additional 50 RV spots. Every RV spot that you add there takes away 2 other car parking spots. As to affordability, again, it was challenged by Councilman Diaz, and we respect that, but it is our intention to draw that Airbnb traffic out of the business, Airbnb business out of the single family homes and into what we think is a much more appropriate site adjacent to industrial and professionally managed. As far as site selection, when we came to the city of Lake Havasu and looked around the real estate offerings, this was the one site that we could find bigger than 3 acres for our project. That's how we ended up on this site. The soil safety sounds very concerning, and we don't currently have any knowledge of soil contaminants on the site that came with the purchase of the site. But that being said, it's a standard practice to be doing borings around the site and environmental testing once we get into the engineering of the project. And if there are any soil contamination issues discovered, they will be adequately addressed following engineers' recommendations. A couple people wondered about future phases of this project. I just wanted to be clear that the entirety of this project is being permitted, and if we make any significant changes to our plans, we have to come back before this body. So there's no bait and switch going on here. What we're proposing is what we're going to do. There will be minor changes as there are of engineering the project, but essentially what you see is what you are going to get. And then finally, I just wanted to reiterate on the density. This is less than the zone allows for. What we are asking for in this specific motion is specifically to be open to the public. We want, as somebody brought up the Views apartment complex that sounds like has very similar offerings to us. It may or may not be open to the public. Sounds like it's unclear on that. When we spoke with the city, they said that this is the way to, for sure, make sure that we can have this project be open to the public, which is important to us. And that is why we are seeking this general plan amendment, is to make sure that this can be a community asset, not just for the people staying on site. And finally, I'll say that the general plan fully supports this use. If you refer back to the staff report, city staff has found that this project meets all of the required findings to approve this amendment, and we're hopeful that you'll agree with us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Now's the time when we bring it back to the table for staff's recommendations. Yes. Oh, we need to read those letters into the record.
Yes, I've got 2 letters from the public that came in by email that I want to read. The first letter is from David and Joy Stumbo, who are owners on Bahama Avenue. We strongly object to anything to do with this project unless you make improvements to the streets leading to the project, including turn lanes and stoplights. Traffic will be too intense for the intersections. Accidents will occur. The visibility of the intersection of Lake Havasu Avenue and Bahama Avenue is restricted by shrubbery to the south, and traffic on Lake Havasu Avenue is always above the speed limit. Besides that, the car wash directly across from Bahama Avenue has only one way to access, so cars are making a U-turn at that same spot. We realize the monetary impact might be appealing to Lake Havasu, but you need to do a traffic study before any project is okayed. So that's the first letter. The other letter is from John Lawson. My name is John Lawson. I live at 1788 Bahama Avenue, Unit B, Lake Havasu City, Arizona. I attended a planning zoning meeting June 19th where the ID 24-4308 was brought forward for a request for a major general plan amendment revising the future land use map designations for 1850 Bahama Avenue, and I won't go into it's all the tracks previously mentioned. At the meeting June 19th, there were many residents from the surrounding area of the stated development property and some from other areas in the city. The developer at the meeting stated that they are planning 202 units and 6 buildings at 5 stories in height. I believe there might be only one other building that is 5 stories in the city. My concerns against this development are traffic. Bahama Avenue is a 2-lane road. It's already used as bypass road, and speeding is a major concern. Intersection at Lake Havasu Avenue is already dangerous, as well as the intersection at Industrial Avenue. These intersections would need traffic signals. Posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour with a curve posted at 20 miles per hour, which is ignored by most drivers. Parking, the developer stated there would be public access to the pool areas and restaurant shops. If families show up with a boat, where are they going to park? The street should not be used for the overflow parking of this development. Fire safety, is Lake Havasu Fire Department even equipped to handle 5 more 5-story buildings? This question was brought forward at the June 19th meeting. Finally, direct cost to developers. If the city doesn't have the developer pay for the extra expenses the city incurs for traffic signals, proper fire safety, etc., it should. I do not support the amendment that changed the future land use designations for 1850 Bahama Avenue. I would also hope the city will use common sense, not approve this change and/or development. That's the 2 letters.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. We are now at staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of points I want to make before I go into the staff findings recommendations. As city staff in the planning department, we're tasked with reviewing projects, applications that come to us. We look at it from what our general plan, what our codes require, and make a determination from compliance with codes if a project is acceptable by meeting the standards. In this particular case, this project, pages 3 and 4 of the staff report, there are almost a dozen components, individual components of the general plan that support the request that was filed by the applicant. And again, I hope everybody had a chance to read it. It's all in there. And as you can see up on the overhead right now on the staff findings recommendation, based upon support for the proposed amendment by numerous sections of the 2016 Lake Havasu City General Plan and complying with Arizona statutory requirements, for consideration of any major amendment to the aforementioned plan, staff recommends the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for Land Use Action number 24-4378, a major general plan amendment revising the future land use map designations for 1850 Bahama Avenue, Tract 115, Block 4, lots 11 through 13, and 21 through 23, and Block 5, lots 1 through 9, 14.08 acres, from high-density residential to resort-related mainland. Mr. Chairman, the other item I wanted to bring up real quick was brought up both by the applicant and by Mr. Stansberry in the audience, and they were referring to the site that was chosen here. That site was indeed approved by City Council in 2005 for a multifamily residential development known as Sonoran Hills. That would have been 2 to 4 story apartment buildings. It was approved as a planned development rezone. It was never built, but prior to the project terminating, a lot of the underground and utility improvements were installed on those properties. And they were various individual lots at the time to accommodate that particular multifamily development. So what happened in 2020, the City Council rezoned it back to RM from the RMPD, and it really has no bearing on this application today, but there is some history here that was brought up by both the applicant and a member of the public. Wanted the Planning Commission to be aware of that.
Is that it?
Mr. Chairman, that completes my recommendation. Pass it back to you.
Okay. We are now at the table for discussion amongst the commission and or a motion. I'm going to start by making a few comments. First off, let's talk about traffic. There's a problem with traffic there. This is my opinion, my perspective. There's a problem with traffic at that intersection. I believe from everything that I have seen, traffic study, et cetera, maybe they're a little low on their 15%, but it doesn't change the current conditions. It's a moot point because it's currently zoned for, as I see it, about 300 properties. They're coming along and asking for 200. That's a benefit. So in my opinion, traffic is kind of a moot point. I will stipulate, though, that there is an issue at that intersection, and maybe the city needs to take a look at it. Secondly, the density, it's a reduction in density, what they're asking for. As far as availability of sites, we're out of land here within the city limits. Yes, there's a lot of land up and down the river, but it's all government owned and we don't have access to it. So I can understand why they chose this particular location. In general, for this particular item, the change in the general plan, I don't have a problem with it. I'll bring up the problems that I might have with it in the next item. That's where I'm at. Anybody else? Ms. Zero.
Okay, looking at this, I have a problem changing it to just for the public to come in because of the things that have been mentioned here and I talked about last time. The traffic study, I'm glad you added the 15%. I'm not sure it's right. I think we need to start looking at all of our traffic studies being done in January, February, not in summertime when we have far less people here in town. Also, with it being a resort, it's a hotel. And so what we've got here is, yes, it may pull from some of the B&Bs in town, but what we're looking for, I'm a strong advocate for affordable housing. I'm not talking low-income housing. I'm talking about housing that our technicians in our clinics, our hospitals, our teachers, our police officers that are starting their careers can afford to live in. And this was currently approved for something like that, where they could build apartments versus resort that's there. The 5 stories is of concern to me. I think that's the biggest we've got in town. And it seems like an odd place to me to build a resort. I think there was good points in that you can't walk anywhere and get to anything that I'm normally used to when I go stay at a resort. I can go across to another restaurant. I can go over to some kind of event. There's nothing there. They have to drive somewhere if they're going to go to anywhere that's there. And my other concern, being a resort versus an apartment complex, is the staffing. I did recruiting for major corporations for almost 40 years. And in that time, I can tell you, you cannot get employees if they cannot find a place to live. We have that problem now, and it will not get better. And I understand you have excellent recruiters, and I'm sure they can find excellent people to work. They won't find a place to live here because that is what we're struggling with. So I would much rather leave it as it is and have it go back to being apartments, and we have something come forward. And to the developer, yes, we are open for business. Yes, we would like your business. I just think that this location is not conducive to what the plan is, although I do like the plan and I do like the way it looks. Somewhere else in town would be great. And I do know we have a challenge with that as well. But I just think this is not the right location for this one. And changing it over so that the public can come in is just not something I'm for.
Anybody else? Ms. Wilson.
So I spend probably about 75% of my day in the affordable housing sector within our community and real estate. And I'm happy to have this conversation with anybody outside here, because to go in depth, it would take a lot more time. But I think that there is some misconception about the affordability of what's needed and what can actually happen, okay? Because when we talk about affordability, what somebody can actually, the cost to build something for what they need to get on income to make it work, it is just not there, okay? But again, I'm happy to have that conversation. There's been plenty of buildings built across the community recently that is for rentals to try and address this, that a lot of people have a lot of vacancies right now. So again, for another time. again, I'll have to go with Jim. This property already is forecasted to have 300 units, right? So it does kind of moot out the water, lights. If it can have the pools already, just not open to the public. So I still think we have some sound issues there. And the traffic, again, 300 versus 200 is a drastic reduction. I also do have a problem moving forward with the next item in regards to that, but I think having it open to the public gives the project the ability to be successful because it will have outside influence.
Anybody else? Ms. Ballard.
Just for clarification, I believe that the amendment that we're addressing today only has to do with redesignating it from high-density residential to resort-related mainland. So this particular item that we're voting on doesn't have anything to do with approving a planned development. It's only to make the general amendment plan. And I have to agree with the chairman that it makes it does make good use of the land, reducing it from the number of density that we're talking about, and it is, in my opinion, probably a viable project to approve this recommendation.
Anybody else? Mr. Lear.
Yeah, looking at everything here, I think what bothers me the most about this project is its relationship to the existing R1 single-family homes. And, you know, the whole nature of the general plan and the zoning is to have the multifamily as a transition of some sort to reduce the impact on the single-family residents. And this just totally strikes me in the wrong, it just hits me the wrong way completely to have the resort and business component there. That changes the whole nature of what a well-designed multifamily development would bring there. And I can't support it.
Anybody else? Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, I want to add something. So just, we're getting ready to redo the general plan, which is ratified by the voters in 2026. And I think one of the reasons this back a while ago was rezoned to what it is right now is because we do need, and I know affordable housing is a term everyone throws out, but what is affordable housing? But it is, I think we should hold off and wait until the general plan is redone, and then we can look at the proper zoning. But if that's ratified by the voters and that people have more impact on that and what this, so I'm against this as it stands right now. So.
Anybody else? Mr. Stevenson?
So let's work back affordable housing. I deal with this every day. I'm in mortgage lending. Affordable housing to the people on the streets is a $2,000 a month payment. If you work that backwards with a no down payment or a low down payment, we're at about a $225,000 to $250,000 price point for a property to get somebody with where interest rates are today. So affordable housing in this project, they're not going to mesh. And for a lot of projects in Havasu, because we just cannot get the land costs down low enough for the unit cost to get down to that low of a price point. So in my world, affordable housing is not attainable. For this particular project, if it is, I see a huge difference between long-term owned properties, condos, apartments, versus a resort with a commercial component. I have a problem with the traffic study being done in September, one of the lowest traffic months probably that's going to be on record, and looking at some of the detailed traffic counts on those intersections. I don't think we have a clear picture yet on really what the impact could be from this project. Plus, we have other projects that are currently being built in that area that are going to add to the density, and I don't know that that's been addressed as well. I think there's still more questions. I appreciate Mr. Springer and Mr. Cannon's ability to work with city, with staff. I can see they have made an extreme effort to try and minimize the impact on those around this property by moving the buildings in and away from the exterior of the land, trying to arrange them in such a way that if there is a noise component, that it is as much shielded as possible. I just think we're still trying to put a round peg into a square hole in this particular location. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Zero.
Just going back to what I said on the affordable housing, I'm not talking about people buying a house. I'm just talking about people being able to rent an apartment. And we've had projects that have come up that they're trying to do that. And so this is already approved for apartments. And that's why I was thinking affordable, not buying a house nowadays is almost impossible, but just somebody building something that people can rent and afford to live in until they can afford things get better. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Motion if we're ready.
Mr. Diaz.
I'd like to make a motion to deny ID 24-4378, a request for a major general plan amendment revising the future land use map designations for 1850 Bahama Avenue, track 115, block 4, lots 11 through 13 and 22 through 23, and block 5, lots 1 through 5, 14.0 acres from high density residential to resort related mainland.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Diaz, a second by Ms. Zero to deny item number 24-4378. Any further discussion on the item?
So a yes vote is the deny.
That is correct. The yes vote will be the denial. Any further discussion? All right, let's call for the question.
So the motion to deny making a recommendation for approval passes 4-3.
All right, now, I have a question to the city attorney. How does this affect the next item?
You'll continue the next item just as you would, no matter what the last recommendation was. You're still making a recommendation to the city council. Therefore, your comments will still be important for their consideration at the next step in the process.
Thank you very much. All right, the next item on today's agenda is item number ID 244379. This is a request for approval of a planned development rezone and multi-phase general development plan for 1850 Bahama Avenue, tract 115, block 4, lots 11 through 13 and 21 through 23, and block 5, lots 1 through 9, 14.08 acres from residential multifamily zoning to residential multifamily plan development to accommodate a resort-style development with a combination of commercial and residential uses and to allow a maximum of 65 feet above the approved designed building pad height for each of 6 residential multifamily buildings. Mr. Gilbert, your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as was stated by the city attorney just a minute ago, the city council will receive your recommendations on both of these items, even though you just denied the general plan. The rezone will go forward as well. Then the council will have their own hearings, and they will have the option to consider both, whether to deny or approve at that time. So,
point being is this body is not a policy-making or decision-making entity. That's done by city council. We provide recommendations. Mr. Gilbert?
All right, I have the area map up. The subject property is a group of smaller lots that have been combined into one parcel located at 1850 Bahama Avenue and comprises approximately 14.1 acres in total land area. The subject property is shown as high-density residential land use category that permits up to 20 dwelling units per acre and is compatible with a large part of the surrounding area, which if you look at the map, and I'll use the mouse here, even the single-family residential zone that's directly south of the project sits on top of a general plan land use category of high-density residential, whereas the low-density residential will be more appropriate. But that's what was decided in 2016 when this plan was adopted. To the north across Bahama Avenue is commercial mixed-use land use with light industrial development upon it, such as storage units, large manufacturing assembly warehouse uses. To the east and west are high-density residential land uses with apartments and condominiums to the west, and mostly vacant land to the east. And as was stated earlier, there are indeed other projects proposed along Bimini and Bahama that are not related to this project, but other high-density projects. To the south is high-density residential land use, but is primarily developed with single-family residential uses. Zoning map. The subject property is shown as residential multifamily. To the north across Bahama Avenue is light industrial. To the east and west are residential multifamily. To the south is single-family residential. And as what you saw earlier in the previous hearing, the general development plan for the project anticipates 6 5-story buildings along with a commercial restaurant structure and a water feature that includes wave pool, lagoon, surfing area, and cliff diving event. The staff report that was prepared for the rezone, there's a number of factors we looked at in there regarding the general development plan that was submitted for the project. And there are a number of criteria that need to be met for a PD rezone, and that's all listed in there as well on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report, and 5 for the findings required. The proposed conceptual development plan went through a detailed review process with all the various staff agencies that look at the project, that be engineering, which is why the city engineer was involved with the traffic study, information that was provided to the developer, what to put together for that. It was looked at by the fire department, all the utility companies, police department. They have all had review on the project. And there have been limited comments from reviewers, but not any major comments related to that. We heard a lot of comment in detail previously from the public on it related to this project on the general plan. There's not a lot extra I have to add on the rezoning other than what the rezone does is if the general plan amendments put in place by city council at their August 13th meeting, if that happens, the rezone would be able to be approved at that point because it would be consistent with the underlying land use. The rezone anticipates a development plan, which you see up on the screen, along with the other 18 pages that are contained as an attachment to the staff report online. For the various components of the project, there'll be 3 phases. It's going to have, they're going to meet the recommendations from the traffic study that was provided, which of course was based on the September traffic numbers. And that's, if that's ultimately approved, we would ask for updated numbers that would be more accurate on the recommendations regarding what to do at the entrance to this facility and anything that may be necessary, as requested by our engineering department at Lake Havasu Boulevard and Bahama, as well as the industrial Bahama. The comments we received from other reviewers, some comments were received regarding utility installation, with Allo and Frontier requesting a developer contact their staff to discuss existing service line locations on the property and need to relocate some of them. And that's the direct result of underground utility work that was done in relation to the 2005 Sonoran Hills project that was later apparently abandoned because it was never constructed. And so there's various utilities in place that are not in good locations, have to be relocated. The Lake Havasu City Engineering Division has provided a list of documents needed from the applicant for project design review if the rezone is ultimately approved. So the various agencies have not had significant comment relating the plan. The fire department has indicated that they can provide service to 5-story buildings. That's from the fire chief. And then also the police department looked at accident records for Bahama Avenue at Lake Havasu Boulevard, and they only note that there's 1 recorded accident in the past 2 years. So that's a significant comment to make there regarding issues on Bahama. There's no doubt that a project like this is going to increase the load on Bahama. However, but that's just what the facts are as of right now regarding that property. So that's all I have for my slides. Mr. Chairman, pass it back to you. Hear from the public. I'm not going to read these letters back in since I already read them for the general plan.
Thank you.
They've already been read once, and then we'll get to recommendation after hearing from the public.
All right, questions of staff by commissioners. Anybody at this point? All right, I think we've kind of, you do? Mr. Stevenson.
So, Mr. Gilbert, just explain to me, in this proposal, it talks about the approved designated building pad. How did we arrive at that for each of these buildings?
It is the same situation that was used for, if you remember, the Delta Drive apartment building up at Chemehuevi and McCullough last October-ish. Same situation there where it's all one property, and so the base grade is where Bahama Avenue says highest point at the northwest corner plus 1 foot. And so when you carry that back over the lot, because it slopes down to the west, they could, even without height adjustment, the buildings further to the west of the property could be significantly tall. For example, if this were done as a multifamily project, there would be height limits that could be exercised that may not normally be feasible without a PD because of the slope of the land. But in this particular case, the plan development's requesting a specific height allowance for each individual building to be 65 feet.
So the basis for it started at the high point on Bahama. So the basis of it started at the high point on Bahama and worked our way down. I'm looking at some of the stuff. I'm not seeing what is the elevation change from the high point to the low point.
It's approximately 45 feet.
Okay. And then I guess the other part of that is again, going back to the good old days, when these were 15 individual lots, those building heights would have been from each individual lot. It just feels like we've gone significantly swaying away from, and height was always from day one an extreme concern when selling these properties originally, and going back even to the 80s where I started, height was always discussed moving forward. And I understand we have a delicate balance of trying to make adjustments for property, but on this particular case, we've gone and combined 15 lots, and it just seems like we've really stretched it on this one.
Which is why they're requesting the actual specific allowance to go to 65 feet as part of the PD. So it's irrelevant really what the base pad elevation is if the PD request is approved, because that would give them 65 feet on each individual building.
So basically what you're saying is because of the fall across the property, the lower properties will be limited to 65 feet, where with the current grading ordinance, there could be potentially a height limit of maybe 75 or 80 feet at that lower end.
I believe the way it's worded is that each individual building will be permitted a 65-foot height limit. Correct. Based on its individual pad height.
Correct. But what Mr. Stevenson was alluding to is if you take the overall grade, established grade for a single property at the 1 foot benchmark of 1 foot above the high point at the middle of the street, it would be much higher than that.
With one caveat.
Go ahead.
Because they combined the lots, that's now one parcel, and that parcel is directly adjacent to an R1 zone. So that kicks in the 18-foot limit being adjacent to R1. So they only get 18 feet above that base elevation, not the 30 that RM would normally have.
Thank you for that clarification.
There is a downside to combining the lots.
All right.
Can I
Does that answer your question, Mr. Stevenson? Okay, Mr. Diaz.
So in plain English for the public, you're basically saying that where it slopes down, it could be a 6-story building.
Well, it's not going to be that high because there's not enough room there. It's about 45 feet is the total elevation that we think a building could naturally do with the 18-foot addition is all for being next to R1. What the applicant's requesting is each individual pad for each individual building be allowed 65 feet from the pad to the top.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Jeff Tuneman, Development Services Director. I'd just like to add a little bit here. So the way it's written is says 65 feet above the approved design pad height. What that means is that they're going to have a civil engineer come in and evaluate the site. So we have the high side on the east side and it slopes down to the west. So we're anticipating that with the fall that Mr. Gilbert talked about, I think he said 40 feet. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but we'll say, let's just say for argument's sake, it's 25 feet. The civil engineer on the west end of the property designs that pad height at that 25 feet below the east side, what that means, what the way the ordinance is written is that they can only be 65 feet above that design pad height. So individual pad height, design pad height by the civil engineer. So the ones up here could be 25 feet above this, but this building is still going to be 65 feet above the design pad height. This one's going to be 65 feet above that design pad height, approved design pad height. So the approved design pad height technically on the high side is going to be, as you spoke, 1 foot above the high point in the street is going to be the maximum grade, we call it, for that property. They could come in and grade that all the way to the west, doing huge retaining walls and whatnot, and those buildings could all be on the same level, 65 feet above. But that doesn't make sense to the developer. It makes sense to follow the terrain, right, and the road. And so the anticipation is that we'll start at the high side. Those will be 65 feet above whatever height that is, and we'll set that grade based on a survey. And then it'll work its way down. But each pad will probably be different due to topography. And each building will only be 65 feet above that design pad height. I hope that helps. And to Mr. Stevenson's point, yes, this was 15 lots and the lots are looked at individually when they're individual lots. However, that's one of the advantages of buying a bunch of property and making one huge lot is that benchmark has to change to the high side of the property.
And really in that case, and what it's kind of brought up is, you know, we've done it in the past when you're doing a couple of lots like we did over on Delta and that, but now we've increased it to 15.
Yeah, and this is an extreme because of the topography, right? There's areas in town where you might only have a 3-foot fall between 3-4 lots, but since we're talking 15 and the way that this land lies in this area, yeah, it's a significant amount.
Does that clear up things while Mr. Tuneman's here? All right.
All right. Thank you,
Jeff. All right. We're still discussing at this point. Questions of staff? Okay. Is the applicant present? Mr. Springer? Please state your name for the record.
Austin Springer, Studio KDA, representing the applicant. I don't think it's super necessary to litigate most of the issues that we talked about in the general plan amendment over again. Noise, traffic, I'll touch on traffic a little bit again. The main issue at play for this motion is the density, which is expressed both in the units, square footage, and specifically in this case, the height of the buildings. What we are proposing, if you could bring that up, it'd be appreciated. What we are proposing is significantly less dense by many different metrics than what is zoned for in this site. The site is zoned RM. As was mentioned by the development director, when we combined the lots, it changed the height limit from 30 down to 18. But for the most part, this is a zone that allows for buildings that are 30 feet in height. When you combine them together, it allows for higher when you have multiple lots on a grade going down. If we were to go by the strict letter of the law, this zoning allows for 18-foot, 2-story buildings essentially, and a 60% lot coverage for the whole site. That equates about to 750,000 square feet of development. We're proposing somewhere in the range of 430. So it's like 2/3 the density of what is zoned for on the site. And the reason that we did that was because we wanted to concentrate that developable area into fewer buildings that are more efficient, that have more parking, more buffer zones, and a better amenity. The first part of our hearing today was about trying to make this a benefit to the community. And the second part is about making this a quality project. We want to make sure that it is a high quality project, that it doesn't involve people parking on the street. It has plenty of parking for both passenger cars and for RVs and boats. And we wanted to make sure there's plenty of room to have nice landscaping, both visually and to provide buffers from the surrounding areas. We tried to concentrate that where we're adjacent to residential uses. The big thing is that we are coming in significantly below what this site is zoned for. We're not coming in here and trying to max out the development. We are asking for an exemption in the height. That is simply so we can make this a higher quality development. As Chris said, this project meets all the required findings for approval, and we're hopeful that you guys find the same thing. One other thing, if you could go to the next slide. We did make some changes on the site in regards to that dead man's corner. We used to have an ingress and egress right in the middle of that corner. We heard the community express some concern about that and have redone the site plan a little bit to add more RV parking in that corner and instead move the ingress and egress to the straightaway a little bit down the road. There's a curb cut-ish there right now. It's sort of like there's not a whole cul-de-sac there, but you can tell it's a place where people currently go in and out of the site. That was one of the changes that we made to the site in order to hopefully alleviate some of the safety concerns. But again, this specific motion is about the density of the site, the height. As was mentioned by the development director, based off of the fall of the site, we are allowed fairly tall buildings as it is. And we wanted to go, if you could go a couple more slides. Keep going. One more. There we go. Great. So this represents sort of what the full build out of the site would be. This is assuming that 30-foot height limit. This is what the site would have looked like if we had come in and said, how can we maximize this site? How can we use all of the code to our advantage? It would have involved a different subdivision of the lots. We would have sort of left a sliver there in between our main development and where the single family lots are, which I will note that those single family lots are in a high density general plan zone. It was intended to be sort of a transition zone, I guess. This represents a compliant project in terms of the density and the height if we were using that 30-foot height limit. And as you can see, it's a nightmare. We wouldn't have nearly as much room for a quality amenity. We have a building right in the middle of our parking space, so we'd have significantly less parking. We tried to right-size this project, and that's what we're hoping that we can get your help in achieving. Thank you.
Any questions of the applicant by commissioners? All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lehr.
Can you explain the landscape buffer on the R1 side at the wash? Where is is it at the top?
It's drawn
of the
wrong
slope?
in those. Yeah, it should be, those trees should be on the edge of the parking lot, and they will be. We're not planning on planting trees at the bottom of the wash. That would be ineffective. The plan is to have those right on the edge of the parking lot, so it shades both noise and the view of cars and the buildings. Yeah.
Good catch. Anybody else? Questions of the applicant? All right.
All right. Thank you,
Mr. Springer.
Yeah.
All right. This is a public hearing. If anybody has anything new to add, since it's pretty much the same thing as the last hearing, I'll entertain listening to you. Anybody in the back? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Matthew Thibault, Thiebaud. I learned today something that I didn't know, that my house was not zoned R1. I can verify for sure that every document I've got says that my house is R1, but I'm being told today that it was the buffer zone or the transition zone between R1 and big development. This is strange. I own an empty lot, one over. I think maybe I'll put up a big apartment on that and sell it off. I'll leave. But when I did buy, I heard it from Mr. Lair and I think Mr. Stevenson. They talked about the buffer zone. And that, to be honest, that's really what this gets down to for me. There was supposed to be a buffer zone between my lot and big development, and now there's not. And you've opened the door to this for everybody. I don't care where you live in this city now. If there's a 1 acre lot next to you that's empty, what's to stop them from rezoning that to high density and putting a big apartment there? It could be right in the middle of a R1 neighborhood. What's to stop it? Whenever the city changed this zoning, and I have no idea when it was, in my opinion, the city violated a contract it made with me and with all the people who live on Bahama and Rainbow, because we were told when we built our houses that there would be a buffer zone between R1 and big development. So that to me is the big problem. Now, if this were 2 stories, I probably wouldn't be here worried about that either. All right, to me, 5 stories is ridiculous right where it is. I don't know if the gentleman that's the developer is still listening to us. I do have one thing I want to say. I don't know if his intentions are good. I don't know. I know his intention is to make money because that's what businesses do. That's his only intention. He doesn't care if it's resort or low income. He doesn't care. His intention is to make money, and that's not a bad thing at all. So maybe his intentions are good. But what I heard from him there he is, what I heard in my head when he said, I heard, give us what we want, a resort, or we're going to give you what you don't want, which is low income housing. So it's still 65 foot tall. And from my position, honestly, I'd rather have a resort behind me than low income housing. That's my backyard. So if my choices are resort or low income housing, I'll take resort all day long. The problem is the buffer, that it shouldn't be that close to my house. For me, that's what it really gets down to in the end. And also, I can see in the future when this is built, Super 8 closing doesn't look like they have much use there. I can see people in these motels that are underused, underfilled, being drawn away and closing up, and then what happens with those buildings. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that has something new to add? We've got a lady coming up already. There's somebody coming up already.
I just was.
Please state your name.
My name's Donna Dernberger. I was wondering, they're talking about 3 phases. How long is the construction supposed to take?
We don't know.
How long will it take for those 3 phases? So how long are we going to be enduring construction noise? That's my question. I don't live, they're not directly behind me, so I'm not worried about my view. I have a forever view out front. I'm hoping not to have a whole lot of noise, if they say that they're going to, have someone there on site to control it. But I'm just wondering how long the construction's planning on taking. That's my only question.
Thank you. Anybody else that has something new to add? Please state your name for the record.
Bonnie Toy. The short Bonnie Toy, apparently. How many handicap parking spots are there, and how many why are they not, when you look at the map of them, from what I could tell, they do not look convenient for someone who is handicapped. And I was wondering who decides that part of a development?
To answer that question is pretty much designated by state law. So they have to have whatever the state law calls for.
Okay, but...
And the location. It may not be shown on the map right now, but it'll be there.
Okay. On the map, it does not look convenient for anybody who is handicapped, and it shows approximately 8 handicap stalls. And how do you get that kind of situation changed for future developments? Because honestly, people who are handicapped do need some more consideration and accommodation. That is my question to you. How do we get that changed in the future?
I can't address that, but Mr. Tuneman is going to come up and give us right behind you.
To the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we're doing here is just a conceptual plan. The design and engineering and review for ADA compliance will be taking place with building permits. So we wouldn't expect to see any type of handicapped access or accessibility on this plan, as it is just strictly a site development plan.
Conceptual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that has anything new to add? Please state your name for the record.
Martin Stansberry. I own a property at 1810 Bentley Lane. It's 9 units. Now that I've heard the presentation, I was a neutral before, but I think I would be leaning towards approving this project. When I saw the developer's slide of what can be built there right now today, which is 300 units versus the 2-something they're planning on building, it kind of makes better sense to me. And a couple of you commissioners voted against the project based on noise and traffic. If it doesn't go this way and it goes to apartments, there's going to be more noise, more traffic, more lights. So I think I'm leaning towards an approval. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else that has anything new to add? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this item, bring it back to the table for staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As was noted earlier, my staff report, this report's gone through review by all the different city agencies, and we reviewed those comments in light of the requirements for approval of a PD plan development. And based on the findings, the Development Review Committee recommends the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for Land Use Action number 24-4379, approving a plan development rezone and phased general development plan for 1850 Bahama Avenue with the following conditions. Condition number 1, maximum building height for the 6 residential buildings shown on the general development plan shall not exceed 65 feet in height above the approved designed building pad for each residential structure. So that's for each separate building will have its own 65-foot limit, so there's no excess height on any of the structures above that. Number 2, the property shall substantially match the conceptual site plan provided with the request. Any substantial change, that's a key word, substantial change means if they're moving buildings around, significantly changing parking, access, amount of commercial, all that would require returning through the process of public hearings. Any substantial change shall require returning to Planning Commission City Council for a new, fully noticed public hearing process. Condition number 3, building permits and design review for compliance with city code shall be required prior to any construction commencing on the subject property. And number 4, all noise ordinance requirements shall be required to be followed by this project during construction and thereafter during regular operations. The city already has noise ordinance regulations in our city code, and those will be required to be followed. And any complaints received will be addressed by the city when they are received. Mr. Chairman, that completes the recommendations.
Okay, we are at the table for discussion and or a motion. Commissioners, anybody? Ms. Zuro.
Just to reiterate a little bit of what I mentioned before, my concerns with the project, one is the height of the buildings. These will be the biggest buildings that we have in the community. Secondly, this is a hotel, basically, and I have great concern about staffing the hotel with people that they would take from other places, because there is just no place for people that they hire to come in and live in our community at this point. So I still have the same concerns I had with the previous one. I do think that with the apartment complex, if the developer goes forward with it, his design here was very nice. I think he would do a very nice apartment complex if he decides to go forward with the project. And I think he would be beneficial to the community in that aspect. But I just having trouble putting a resort in this particular location.
Ms. Wilson, did you have a comment?
So I'm going to reiterate as well. I am for the project as being a resort. I like the idea for the reasons of density and all those things that you guys have addressed. I will tell you that, and I brought it up the first time we had this meeting, the height thing is a concern for me. I'll be real honest that it is the highest in Lake Havasu. You do have some residential there. I knew that was going to be a concern going forward. But as far as it being a resort and staffing it, that's not for me to decide. That's your guys' data on what you're doing. And as far as housing is concerned, again, I don't see a concern, but the height in itself is a concern for me.
Anybody else? Ms. Ballard.
I see the project. I see the project as a quality project and viable as to what the planned improvements would be. However, I have a little bit of still problem with the traffic study, although I agree with the chairman that it's kind of a moot point. If you're talking the difference between 200 and 300 occupants, the traffic study becomes a relatively moot point, except I acknowledge that it's a terrific impact on that intersection on Lake Havasu Avenue. I've been through that myself, had to go through parking lots in order to make a turn to go around, so I understand that. My main problem with this is I consider the height of the buildings to be an invasion of privacy for the residents that live close enough to be impacted like this. I believe that our general plan calls for buffer zones, and that is why our buffer zones go from commercial to high density to mixed use to down into where you finally get down to residential to provide some relief between these impacts. I think that moving from residential to a commercial use where the restaurants and the basically hotel is going to be is probably not the best use. Although I think this would be a wonderful project, I think perhaps it would be better in another place.
Anybody else? Okay, we are at the table for further discussion and/or a motion. Let me add to the discussion. I also think that this is a pretty viable project. My biggest concern with the project is the height. And being a builder in this community, I'm all for as much height as you can get, but I think that we might be overstepping our bounds on this particular one. Maybe 3 stories might be a little more acceptable to the community, but I think the project is a good project, and that's my only concern is the height. So, anyway, we are still at discussion and/or a motion, commissioners. Anybody?
Jim?
Ms. Wilson.
I'll make a motion to deny ID 244378, a request for major. Actually, what's on my for the height difference? I don't think what's on my screen is appropriate.
You can say whatever you'd like as far as...
So ID 244379, a request for approval of plan development rezone multi-phased general development plan for 1850 Bahama Avenue, track 115, block floor, lots 11 through 13 and 21 through 23, and block 5, lots 1 through 9, 14.08 acres from residential multifamily RM to plan development RMPD to accommodate a resort style development with a combination of commercial and residential uses to allow a maximum of 65 feet above the approved design building pad height for each 6 residential multifamily buildings.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Wilson and a second by Ms. Ballard to deny ID 244379. I'm not going to read all the rest of that. So we are now at the table for discussion, and I'm going to open up discussion. Your motion is an outright denial. We do have the ability to put conditions on this motion if that were something that would be desirable. If, say, for instance, the sticking point is the height, we could put a limitation on the height or something like that. Just a suggestion at this point. But it would have to go through the maker of the motion and the seconder. That's all I have to say. Further discussion. Mr. Diaz.
I would go with her motion as is, and then if they want to come back at a later date and, lower the heights or whatever, then I think her motion's fine as the way it stands.
Okay. Anybody else? Let's call for the question then.
The motion to deny making a recommendation of approval passes 7-0.
Okay, the next item on today's agenda is give me a moment here. ID 24-4380. This is a request to amend City Code Section 14.02.03E as in Echo. Table 2-6 to increase the maximum density in R3 district from 10 dwelling units per acre to 16. And it goes on to say 14.04.01.A.1, table 14.01-1, to review the min-max density in R3 district from 4 to 10 dwelling units per acre to 4 to 16, and 14.04.01.A.1, table 4.01-1, to revise maximum height of development adjacent to single and two-family uses existing prior to the effective date of the development code in R-SGD district from 18 feet to 30 feet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may state real quick before I get into this case, anyone that was here for the Bahama rezone and general plan amendment, August 13th at 5:30 p.m. will be the city council public hearings on that very same item. The recommendations were to deny today from the planning commission. Those will be received by the city council on that date, and they will hold their own public hearings. So you have an opportunity to comment on August 13th, and then the city council will make the final decision on these two applications. Let's see here. Okay, so there's two cases coming. This is one, first the two tonight on text amendments. So this particular one, there's two minor changes we're looking at making. This particular text amendment will increase the density available in the R3 limited multiple family district from the range of 4 to 10 units per acre to 4 to 16 units per acre. And what that will do is it will permit more variation in project designs and create more overlap with lower density RM, the lower density range of RM multiple family district densities. R3 districts have a max 15 feet height limit, so they will be one-story projects no matter wherever they're built. And many such projects are proposed on smaller lots where density issues have caused PD rezones in addition to minor general plan amendments because the underlying land use category did not match existing zoning on the properties. And the commission probably remembers a few recently, and I have some examples here I want to go over. So you probably remember this project from back in May, and this is what it would look like under the density that R3 allowed. And the applicant came in requesting to be able to go to a higher density, somewhere a little over 15 units per acre, which resulted in this project. These R3 projects have to go through design review. So they have to provide buffers, they have to provide landscaped areas, parking, ingress, egress, dumpster enclosures, covered parking. They have to provide all these required features which take up land area as well as the units. And even with all that done, that's what the 4 to 10 range allows on a lot of these smaller lots. We have developed several projects recently. We're in the situation. We have developers right now that are waiting to see what happens with this because they're looking at smaller lots where they want to put 4 units on a lot that the 4 to 10 density only allows 3. So we're not talking a lot of unit difference, but it makes a difference in the cost to install the housing. And again, along the lines of providing affordable housing, if you raise the cost by requiring less units on more acreage, which is very expensive land in Havasu, you're going to have higher rent costs. So this will ultimately potentially help with providing more workforce housing than under the 4 to 10 range. And the example I have up here is a great example because the project clearly meets all the requirements and just simply isn't feasible with what you see right here on this overhead compared to what the Planning Commission City Council approved back in May and June, which is this. So that's why that change being proposed. And the 2 tables that were provided, there's a minor change on this table, so from 4 to 10 to 4 to 16, and a minor change on the actual R3 limited multiple family district to reflect the same thing. So that's the totality of that change. The next amendment included in this particular application is only one district. There's been some comment that we've seen online regarding citizens posting that referencing to it being applicable citywide. That's not true. This is only applicable to the RSGD Southgate District Zone. That district used to be the R4, which is a multifamily zone. And the RSGD was created to provide a buffer between US 95 and the commercial Southgate District that directly lines US 95. And it was intended with the 42-foot base height in that district. 42 feet's the base height. It was intended to be a multiple family mixed residential development. But what we think happened is if you look at this table that's up here, the RSGD and the RM, which is the residential multifamily, are very similar. If you look at the use tables, almost exactly the same permitted uses. But the RM has the 30-foot next to adjacent single and 2 family uses existing prior. We believe that was intended to be 30 and was for some reason shown as 18. What this does not affect is 2 years ago there was a amendment proposed to change the height limit from 18 feet next to R1 and R2 zones. That's not being addressed here. That's a separate section of code on a previous table to this one. This is only to address within the RSGD district itself to other internal RSGD lots. This does not apply if an RSGD lot abuts an R1 zone. It will be limited to 18 feet. This is only within RSGD. And have example for this one as well. So the dark purple at the bottom is the commercial. The light purple at the top is the residential component. So if you look at the left box, this vacant lot is right now limited to 18 feet, but would be permitted with the amendment to be a maximum 30 feet next to existing 1 and 2 family residential within the RSGD district. Essentially, that's a 2-story building next to 1-story. And it's important to note that we have that right now in the golf course in single family districts where you have RE, you have 2-story single family homes next to 1-story single family homes with a 30-foot height limit. It's the same situation. So to make this 18 feet, we believe wasn't intended and is really making development of the RSGD develop it out more difficult. Another example we give in the second box, the property next door. This lot could be a maximum 42 feet, the RSGD district base height limit, or 3 stories in height without the proposed amendment right now. And it overlooks the lot next to it, which would be limited to 18 feet, also into those existing 1 and 2 family residences. So we believe the 18-foot limit wasn't intended to be that low. We think the 30-foot that's reflected for the RM similar zone is what probably should have been there, and that will help in developing all the vacant lots that we have in RSGD, and there's a bunch. And I think this is part of what's been hampering development coming in there, because the lot costs to come in there only build a 1-story building because someone happened to beat them to it and build next door. We think isn't reasonable, because having 2-story next to 1-story, just grading up by 1 story is a normal increase where you step up by 1, as opposed to the hearings we had earlier where the applicants were asking for 5-story buildings next to single-story. That is a much more dramatic request. But this is just a single-story increase in this amendment here. So that's the logic we had behind these. We think it's going to promote more mixed-use housing in the RSGD. And in the R3 zone, it's going to promote less of the situations that we've seen in the last year with projects coming in with the problem with a 1, 2, or 3 unit density problem on single-story, these smaller single-story dwellings or duplexes. So, Mr. Chairman, that completes what I have to report. It's very minor changes, but they have potentially a very major impact going forward.
Okay, questions of staff by commissioners. Anybody? Mr. Stevenson.
So, Mr. Gilbert, do we know how many potential lots at the end of the day this could positively affect? Or
there's a lot in R3. R3 is a very big district around the city, scattered in different areas. But again, they're all single story. So it's not a height issue. It's more of a density issue with the tiny homes type of thing. If you can get a few more, as the example I showed you, if you can get a few more of the tiny homes on the property like this, instead of like this, you're going to make the rents more affordable. And that's going to speak to some of the comments we heard today regarding providing workforce housing for so our young professionals can live in the community. So, but the RSGD issue, there's I'd say about 30% of the lots in RSGD are undeveloped, and this will substantially help in encouraging appropriate use of these remaining parcels. And in both of these particular cases, we have builders actually waiting to see what happens here. This was not put forward to accommodate them. They came in after we were already working on this. And we told them, here's what we're doing. If you want to wait and see what happens, this may be beneficial to you. So these are definitely hot button issues that could have dramatic impact.
Can you go back to the slide that showed the example of like the tiny homes?
Yes.
So as a matter and comment, as I'm seeing these pop up around town, I'm seeing an issue when we're maximizing the density with these units, and that is we're having these with 1-car garages that are not being utilized as garages. They are being utilized as additional unpermitted rooms and or storage units, and the vehicles are parking on the streets, and we're causing clutter. So just as a point of comment, I understand we're trying to maximize the density on these things, but I think we're also creating a problem by doing that is I'm seeing on some of these projects around town, an incredible amount of cars parked on the street because we've maximized the parking.
And that is unfortunately, that is a code enforcement problem, even in the single family zones where we have a lot of garages that are essentially storage now and have created all kinds of issues for our code officers to pursue. And we have a lot of those cases open, including in multifamily.
How you make someone use their garage as a garage unless it's just covered parking.
We would have to.
Wish I had a solution.
We would have to do enforcement.
Eliminate the street parking.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So I guess I would note that, we just had the conversation about maximizing or allowing more space on an R1 lot as far as accessory dwellings and garages and whatever. So I don't see much difference in allowing this zoning to do the same thing. It still has to meet all the parking requirements. If we increase units, we have to increase parking. Again, this does speak to a lot of the conversation as far as cost to build and getting more affordable as far as rentals or cost to sell. So I don't see a problem with this.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, the last fall, the City Council approved an increase in the parking requirements for these multifamily developments as well. So even with those increased numbers, like this project right here, is still, with the increased density, meets all those standards.
Okay, any other comments from commissioners? All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on this item? Anybody at all, pro or con? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
Martin Stansbury, I'm a real estate broker, also a developer in town. I think the more units we can get on a lot, the better. My biggest concern, I've said it before this commission before, and I've been in front of the council multiple times, is we're not requiring enough parking. A perfect example of this disaster is Swanson, from Lake Havasu Avenue all the way to Acoma, is a parking disaster. And once it's done, there's no way to unring that bell. So the more units, the better. Let's just make sure we have adequate parking. Thank you.
Sir? Anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Please state your name for the record.
Bonnie Toy. What is a garage according to Lake Havasu City?
Covered parking.
Covered parking? So it's different than
Every property requires one covered parking stall.
Okay, so it's different than what is in the dictionary, correct?
I don't know what's in the dictionary.
Either a shelter or repair shop for automotive vehicles, or a cabinet with a vertical rolling door that is used for storing small kitchen appliances, according to Merriam-Webster. I was just curious because you said that people do not use their garage as storage for their car. They use it for other storage items, and then you mentioned enforcing the code to making it you can't store stuff in your garage as a garage. You have to store a car in it, and just didn't understand that concept. Why people can't park in their driveway and store stuff in their garage, and how would you enforce that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Gilbert.
We have a lot of properties in town where excess stuff has become a problem that our codes is addressing, where it actually spills out of the garage. If you have a driveway and you can park in the driveway, that's still parking for that single family house. That's not a problem. The problem comes when the garage gets full and starts spilling out into various properties, and our codes do enforce that and are working on a number of cases right now. But a garage is an example of what covered parking could be for these developments. It could just be a shade cover like City Hall has out front. It doesn't have to be a garage.
So that those complexes aren't required to have a garage if they have a shade covering?
They have to have covered parking, not enclosed parking, just covered.
Okay.
But in like this case that's up here on the overhead, they happen to have garages.
And how do you prevent code enforcement from making sure that your car is parked in the garage?
Code is complaint-based. Our officers would react to complaints. If there's a big parking problem that happens, then they would look into it and investigate. And if they find that there's a problem with parking being overused, then it's something we could pursue as a zoning violation.
Thank you.
Anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this item and bring it back to the table for staff's recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff recommends the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for land use action number 24-4380, amending various development code sections regarding R3 district unit density and height limits within the RSGD district, as stated previously.
All right, we are at the table for discussion and or a motion, commissioners. Anybody?
Motion.
Mr. Diaz.
Make a motion to approve ID number 24-4380, request to amend City Code sections 14-02-03-E, Table 2.6 to increase the maximum density in R3 district from 10 dwelling units per acre to 16. 14.0401A1, Table 1401-1 to revise the min-max density in R3 district from 4 to 10 dwellings per units per acre to 4 to 16. And 14.04.01.A.1, Table 4-01-1 to revise maximum height of developments adjacent to single and two-story uses existing prior to the effective date of the development code in R-SGD district from 18 feet to 30 feet.
I second.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz, a second by Ms. Zero to approve ID 24-4380 with staff's recommendations. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none, let's call for the question.
This motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Next item on today's agenda is ID 24-4396, a request to amend City Code sections 14.03.02, permitted use table, Table 3-1, to add backyard fowl as a permitted accessory use on single-family residential properties. 14.03.03.E as in echo. Use-specific standards, accessory uses to add regulations for the keeping of backyard fowl, and 14.06.03 to add a definition of fowl. Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to state statute changes through House Bill 2325 that passed this year, signed by the governor, takes effect on September 14th, all single-family residential properties, not zoning properties, in the state are required to be permitted to keep backyard fowl under certain conditions.
How did that get through the legislature?
The first table that I have up here shows how we're adding backyard fowl as accessory uses to our use table, with note number 2 that backyard fowl are allowed as accessory uses in these districts for single-family detached dwelling residents existing as of September 13th, 2024 only. So that's anticipated to be the adoption date by City Council of the regulations. The next one is the new code edition standards that we're adding to 14.03.03.E, use-specific standards for these chickens. And these are all in accordance with state statute as well. That was included in House Bill 2325. So I'm going to go over these for the benefit of the public listening from remotely. It's going to be subsection E, accessory uses. Under accessory uses, number 9, backyard fowl. A single-family detached residence may keep up to 6 fowl in the backyard of the property. Accessory dwelling units to single-family detached dwellings do not qualify for additional fowl. So it's just still considered one property. B, no male fowl may be kept, including roosters. C, fowl must be kept in an enclosure located in the rear or side yard of the property and at least 20 feet from a neighboring property line. The enclosure shall not be more than 200 square feet in area. The height of the enclosure shall not exceed the height of the required perimeter fence line of the property, but in no instance shall the enclosure exceed 8 feet. The required perimeter fence shall have at least 80% opacity, not exceed a height of 6 feet unless located within the buildable area of the lot, which would be inside the setbacks. Then 8 feet maximum with an approved building permit issued by the city and adequately screen the fowl enclosure from neighboring properties. D, enclosure shall be maintained and manure picked up and disposed of or composted at least twice a week. Composted manure shall be kept in a manner that prevents migration of insects. E, any water source shall have adequate overflow drainage. F, all feed shall be stored in insect and rodent-proof containers. And finally, G, fowl are permitted from running at large. Oops, sorry. And then lastly, there is the addition under state law to add the definition of fowl, and that'll go under 14.06.03 definitions in our development code, subsection F, and it will be termed as the word fowl. A cock or hen of the domestic chicken is how the state specifically defines it in their statute. So the importance of that for people listening at home is that does not include quail, does not include ducks, does not include geese. It specifically states of the domestic chicken. So that's the only animal that provision allows.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point that out so it's not all different types of birds. Mr. Chairman, that completes my presentation.
I don't believe it. So anyway, we are at the table for discussion.
So,
commissioners,
question. So this is a new state regulation you mentioned, and we have to. We have to make this law in Havasu.
Yes, so it's going to go into effect at state law where the city is going to be prohibited from prohibiting chickens within the city. So there are certain regulations that we can put into place, which we are doing at this time, but that's all we can do. We can't prohibit them. We can only regulate them to the extent allowed now by state law.
We can't prohibit them anymore.
Right. I got some questions for Sonny and Leo on this one.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff by commissioners? I do. Mr. Stevenson.
Mr. Gilbert, in the House bill, it talks about and has the language that prohibits a residence of a single-family detached residence on a lot that is 1/2 acre or less in size, and we have not carried that over to our ordinance. Is there a reason for that? Or
I believe we have on the use table here. We have it shown as an accessory use in every zone, every residential zone except the RA, which is the agricultural, and those allow animals by right.
So I guess my question is we're saying single family residence, so it doesn't really matter the size, but the state is saying that we can't prohibit it from properties that are 1/2 acre or less in size.
I think what the state's saying is on properties 1/2 acre or less in size, we can't prohibit it. Right.
We've actually expanded it then from what the House bill is saying it's for all properties regardless of the size.
Well, okay.
I'm splitting hairs, but I guess I'm just trying to understand.
Right. And then later in the section, it has a provision where it says for properties under 1 acre. So it's a little confusing, but what we take that to mean is when you look at our lot sizes, our R1 is 10,000 square feet minimum, and our RE, I believe, is the 1/2 acre lot. So you're looking at pretty much all our residential zones are impacted by that.
My other question is it just has side yards. So what defines a side yard? Is that side yard extend out to like even with the front of the garage, or can a side yard extend out past the front of the garage to the street? I don't see anything that says how far from the street these cages could be.
Front yards.
I'm just, again, I know I'm splitting hairs, but I just see going down the line that
front setbacks go to the front of the property. The front yard is the front setback. The side yards do not extend to the property line on the front or the rear. So you have the rear, which is the entire width of the backyard. You have the front, which is the entire width of the front yard. And then you have the side yards, which go from that setback line to the rear yard setback line.
So it would be the structure back. So even if someone has their garage, say 40 feet back from the front of the property, they couldn't extend this cage to the front setback property.
No, it could not be in the front setback, no. It was only a side or rear yard. And they would have to have the room to do it because they have to be 20 feet from a property line. And in Havasu, you don't see a lot of 20 feet distance to property lines. And then when you have the enclosure, if the enclosure is 200 square feet, to keep that 200 feet from the side property lines can be tough. I'm sorry, 20 feet.
Enclosure, we're just talking about side fencing. We're not talking about anything over the top, which could be another problem with if they're throwing out feed for the chickens with pigeons and other non-approved fowls entering into the property, which opens up another can of worms.
Correct.
So again, I guess I'm here from the government. I'm here to help. Beware.
Yeah, we were mandated to buy that bill to allow for this.
It's foul. Let me know when you give us any.
The hazard of not approving this by September 14th is anyone that's illegally keeping them right now would become grandfathered. So we're trying not to do that by getting our regulations in place before the state law takes effect, so that we're not caught in that trap where people say, well, the state allowed me to do it because you didn't have codes on the date that they set as the effective date.
Let them off at the pass. Anybody else?
Jim, I'd like to make a motion.
Ms. Wilson.
Motion to approve ID 244396 to request the amend to the city code with staff's findings and recommendations.
We have a motion by Ms. Wilson and a second by Ms. Ballard to approve ID 24-4396. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we've opened it to public yet.
Oh, I am sorry. My bad. This is a public hearing. Before we go to the motion, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this issue? Anybody at all? Okay, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the table for discussion and/or Ms. Wilson's motion. Want to restate it?
Motion to approve ID 244396, the request to amend the city codes per staff's findings and recommendations.
I approve. A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Ms. Wilson and Ms. Ballard to approve ID 24-4396 with staff's recommendations. Any further discussion on this foul motion?
It's foul motion.
Hearing none, let's call for the question.
It's foul the way we have to vote on this.
The motion passes 7-0.
All right, moving along. Call to the public. This is the portion of the meeting where the public can address the commission on any subject whatsoever. We may not have a conversation with you. We may not respond, but we can hear you if you want to speak. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to address the commission? Hearing none, I'll close the public, call to the public portion of the meeting and refer to Mr. Gilbert, future meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next meeting of the Planning Commission is going to be on August 7th. And we're set on that, right? I believe we're set on that one. There's nothing potentially going to be added. And that's going to be a parking and common amendment on Acoma Boulevard would be the only case.
For the record, I will not be here for that meeting, so Ms. Wilson's going to have to step in. Yep.
Never had to do that.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.